If you didn't hear that, the meeting's being recorded for our purposes. We don't put it on the internet. Mr. Jones, you're going to tell me when you think we've reached the critical mass.
I will be sure to do that.
Thank you.
So as it stands, we are at 87 participants. So I believe that if you would like, Madam President, we can start the meeting.
We will. Thank you. That seems good. I know there will be some that will continue on. So good morning, everyone, to the February 25th, 2022 Business Board meeting of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. The first thing I'm going to ask for is Mr. Jones to call the roll to determine if we have a full board and/or quorum. Mr. Jones?
Board Member Griego?
Good morning. Yes, here.
Board Member Johnson?
I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
Board Member Ramirez?
Good morning. Here.
Board Member Valines?
Here.
Board Member Countryman?
Present.
And President Dolan.
I'm present. Good morning. If I did not say so, I meant to say that I'm calling this meeting into session. The next thing I'm going to do, and then we'll continue with the agenda as it is, I'm going to call on our executive officer to ask if there are introductions or announcements that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Madam President. We do have one very happy announcement today, and I would like to be the first to congratulate on camera Board Member Mike Valines, who yesterday was reappointed for a third full term with the board, plus the first 2 years. So we are going on, 14 years with Mr. Valines on the board, and we're very pleased that he's been reappointed by Governor Newsom. And thank you. We also had news yesterday, if anyone hasn't yet heard, Jane Dolan, our Vice President, was reappointed as well to a 4-year term and also designated President of the board. So we are now have our new Madam President, Jane Dolan. For anyone who hasn't heard that yet, we do still have one vacancy on the board. We are awaiting that announcement. So we do have a 6-member board, and we are so pleased to have Jane Dolan as our new president. We're very much looking forward to her administration and good things to come. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for that. You had no choice but to say you were happy. So good morning again. My name is Jane Dolan, and I am the president of the board. Now, I spent the last 12 hours kind of grinning about that, and then this morning I felt the weight of the importance of doing a good job for an agency that is an important entity in the world of water and protection of people's lives and property, and to head up a board for whom I have a great deal of respect and even admiration and affection. So we apologize for the delay of starting this meeting. To accommodate other people's schedules, we needed to have a closed session, and we started at 8:30, and it just delayed the start of this business meeting. So appreciate your understanding and you all being here. So I think that we are conversant enough and experienced enough with all of these video, virtual, call-in, Zoom, WebEx meetings that I don't need to recite those. But if you do have some issues and you could find your way to a phone to the office, someone will try to assist you with that. And I do want to remind everyone that if you are not speaking, keep your background noise down by being on mute. And then if you wish to offer a comment or speak, I will be able to see your hand up on the screen that I'm looking at. And we'll call on you when it is appropriate to do so. If you're calling in, instead of doing that, please mute. And if you want to unmute when you're called on to talk or wish to talk, it's *6. And if you want to raise a hand, it's *3. To put the hand up, put the hand down. If you're a phone call-in person. So as we begin the agenda, and it's my understanding it will be handled in order, except for the first two things we did a bit differently. Each agenda item will be announced as it comes up, and there will typically be a staff or other presentation of the information. Then I ask board members for their input or questions or discussion. And then I will ask if there are any members of the audience who wish to speak. There will be certain times that I will call a break. I won't do that in the next 5 minutes, however. And if it looks like we are meeting into what would be a lunch hour, we'll call a little bit longer break, perhaps 30 minutes, but we may be done. So we plan to handle this agenda by its order unless staff has discovered something since yesterday that would change that process. It appears not. So let's begin. We have handled items 1 and 2. Item 3 is the approval of minutes. This is an action item, and your board president will call upon the secretary to say that the minutes have been reviewed by your secretary and believed to be in order and appropriate, but we'll pause to see if you have found the ubiquitous typo or have a question. 1, 2, 3. Is there? Oh, Mr. Countryman, did you have a question on the minutes?
You're on mute, board member Countryman.
No, I was going from other meetings. I was given a hand vote to approve. Sorry.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by board member Grego.
Second.
Second by board member Johnson. Thank you. That's the motion before us. Please call the roll.
Board Member Grego,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Aye.
Board Member Ramirez,
Aye.
Board Member Valines,
Aye.
Board Member Countryman,
Aye.
President Dolan.
Yes. I forgot that's how you say it. All right. Item 4 is the review of the agenda, which I will try to do succinctly. We will proceed as organized. There's one item on the consent calendar for a permit for certain structures on Garden Highway in Sacramento. Then there is a time for public comments. That is the time that if someone has something not on the agenda they wish to bring forward, they may. The board cannot discuss except very briefly and is prohibited from taking action on such items that are not on the agenda. Then we'll have a report of legislation and related matters from our staff. There are 3 informational presentations, a levy inspection report, a monthly report from DWR, and a standing item on the progress of the plan update. Items that require action will come next, adopting changes and an update to our regulations and transmittal to the Office of Administrative Law, a request for a permit of a levee project at the Bear River, and amendments to project partnership and local partnership agreements for American River common features. Then there are informational items regarding Three Rivers levee improvement, efforts to achieve 500-year standards for their area, staff report of the status of the cease and desist issued last September. And then we will close out our agenda with receiving staff written reports for monthly activities and notice of future meetings. I understand we do not plan to have further closed session at the end of the meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Dua?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
President Dolan, thank you.
And after that, we'll adjourn. So let's proceed. Consent item. The consent agenda is item number 5. The only item is A. It's a permit for Todd Wilson for certain structures along Garden Highway in Sacramento. Mr. Wright, is everything on this in order?
Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. Michael Wright, Chief Engineer for the board. Yes, the consent calendar is in order. We have received the Corps' letter of permission for permit number 19484.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, do any of the board members have a question? Does anyone want to remove this from consent? Which is the same as acting on it because there's only one item. I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in the audience that cares to have this discussed more? I see no one. It's being monitored by Mr. Jones and Ms. Gallagher. So is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Griego. Second. Do I just assign a second to Mr. Johnson? Don't smile. All right.
I can second.
Okay, a second by Board Member Johnson. This is to approve the consent agenda. Please call the roll. Wake up, you all. Please call the roll.
Board Member Griego,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Aye.
Board Member Ramirez,
Aye.
Board Member Valines,
Aye.
Board Member Countryman,
Yes.
President Dolan.
Yes. The motion carries. The vote is 6-0 with one vacancy. Thank you. Item number 6 is public comment. At this point, it would be for those of you who are participants and members of our audience. Does anyone wish to make a comment to the board? I think I see a hand up. Is that Mr.
Dominic Cooley.
Is that Mr. Gooley who wishes to make a comment?
Yes, it is, Ms. Dolan. Hold on a second. Thank you, Ms. Dolan. Congratulations on becoming the president. Last Friday, I submitted copies of all the public comments that I submit to the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, as well as the reclamation districts here in the county. As you know, I'm active in urban flood control down here. The issues that I'd like the Central Valley Flood Protection Board to look over are funding for both the Smith Canal Gate and the Lower San Joaquin River project. The Lower San Joaquin River project, we have not done the Prop 218 election yet, so we're not sure if the people of Stockton would like to pay for it. They haven't even done the feasibility study for the Prop 218 election. There's also issues of FEMA compliance for the Smith Canal Gate. It's very detailed information that I submit in my comments, so I'd request that maybe someone reviews that. Business and Professions Code 6730.2 and 6730. I think CVFPB is a public agency. I think they should have an engineer and responsible charge. They don't think so. They think they're a special district. And another issue is advocating for a Proposition 218 election. So they're all very detailed. I realize it's quite a bit to look over, but I think the Central Valley Flood Protection Board would do themselves some good to delve into the details of the detailed comments that I submit in writing every meeting of CVFPB, and also for the reclamation districts, specifically 1614 and 828 along the Smith Canal. So thank you all for what you do, and thank you.
All right. We acknowledge that receipt there, and thank you for your comments. I know you understand that's all we can do at this point. Is there anyone else who wants to offer a public comment? And you can put your hand down now, Mr. Gooley. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, we don't see anyone else. So we'll proceed with our agenda then. Item number 7 is the legislative update. Our policy advisor, Mr. Suen. Good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan, members of the board, Darren Soon, Legislative and Policy Advisor. I want to also offer my personal congratulations to you, President Dolan, and Board Member Valines on your reappointment. As for the legislative update, I'll start with at the California level. Thank you, Ryan. Next slide, please. At the California level, you all may be aware February 19th was the last date to introduce new bills in this session. And I took note of some bills I think we'll be keeping close eye on as things progress. In here, the AB 921 that was reactivated by Senator McCarty, and SB 901 by Senator Pan. Both of these bills authorize the West Sacramento Levee Project to receive state funding and consolidate RD 900 with MA4. Now, both of them will be moving together, but we expect that Senator McCarty's bill will be modified to be consistent with Senator Pan's. Also, interestingly, SB 1253 by Senator Melendez, the infrastructure plan bill, talks about requiring an infrastructure plan update every 5 years that speaks to flood prevention and maintenance. And so that's something that we'll be also keeping a watchful eye on. And then finally, AB 2387 by Assemblymember Garcia, the reviving the Bond Act. In there, $35 million is scheduled to go to the board and for flood risk, supporting flood risk reduction, information, dissemination of information. And so we'll also watch that as that progresses. And as you know, it needs to have 2/3 of the legislature to approve, the governor's signature to get on the ballot, and then finally a majority of voters to pass that. I'll stop there for a second if there's any questions at the state level before I move on to the federal level.
Board members, any questions? I see none. Thank you for that information.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. And so at the federal level, we're not much to report there other than that we're in another continuing resolution. Congress adopted a continuing resolution that will now expire to March 11th. So none of the 12 appropriation bills have been adopted by Congress. The word is that things are progressing, obviously, and the hope is that they need additional time in order to work out the details in order to get things done, and thus the extension to March 11th. So progress is happening, we are told. Again, I want to also thank Carpy Clay and Julie Minerva for their support in providing this information. What complicates matters is that if the appropriation bills are not approved by March 11, the president's budget for FY23 is anticipated to be released in mid-March. So conceivably, you could have 2 fiscal year budgets being talked about on the Hill, and of course that would be very confusing. So there is a lot of incentive to get these appropriation bills done for FY22. So we'll keep an eye on that. I also want to offer Felix Young from the Army Corps of Engineers an opportunity to speak to some of the core projects and any information he's able to share. Felix, are you available this morning?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Darren. Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. I'm Felix Young. I am the Program Manager for Strategic Planning and Alignment in the Sacramento District of the Corps. So first of all, on behalf of the district, I'd like to thank our state and local partners for the tremendous support that you have provided across our portfolio. To answer the question that was posed last month, which is what are the effects of this delay in FY22 appropriations, I will first point back to the president's budget for fiscal year 2022 that he released in May of 2021. Yes, we are a little bit behind schedule. Those are the projects that President Biden proposed for funding and are awaiting Congress's response to know whether they will get funded or not. Now, there was one project sponsored by the board that the administration put forth. That's West Sacramento, $17.9 million for New Start construction. And that cannot begin until Congress approves it in any upcoming fiscal year 2022 appropriations bill or omnibus. I just also want to put a side note. President Biden also named the Lower San Joaquin project in his budget proposal. The work plan released under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provided federal funding for that. So we don't do that. So that's taken care of. Now, if and when FY22 appropriations is signed into law, we will then know whether any other project in the area will receive funding. I also want to confirm and second the information that Darren provided. Yes, we are still waiting to see what happens by March 11th, and the signs are positive and constructive right now. All of the subcommittees have received their new allocations to adjust their bills. But as we have all experienced, it's really not the plane doesn't really land until we know we are there. So we are going to be watching very closely to see if they can come to agreement by March 11th. If they do not, then that becomes a matter of another continuing resolution, and there will be questions about how long the next CR is going to be, and whether we are looking at a full year CR essentially. So those are all up in the air. There's been no update over this past week on how they're doing. We just continue to hear, yes, we're making progress. We are making progress. The final thing I also want to address is what Darren said about the president's budget for fiscal year 2023, which begins on October 1st of later this year. So yes, absolutely, that will be a little bit of confusion as to the timing. We are still hearing that the president's budget is pending release in mid-March, but again, no firm explicit confirmation one way or the other. We'll just have to wait and see. Subject to your questions.
Thank you for being here. We always appreciate seeing you and hearing from you. That you can give clarity to what's happening at the federal level is remarkable.
Thank you also to Darren for his partnership on these updates. Very, very helpful for us as well.
Yes, they are. So it's confusing to know that there's a budget not yet adopted that's to cover the fiscal year that is approaching its half mark, and then one will be introduced on top of that. So that'll just make the discussions in Washington, D.C. even more challenging.
Absolutely. I also want to offer my thanks to Felix as well.
Okay.
Madam President, can I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Countryman.
The West Sacramento project is extremely important to us, and I wasn't exactly clear what the status of the funding. If I understood what you said, it's not currently funded and this appropriation bill needs to occur?
So the funding that we are waiting, the board member Countryman, is for it to enter into new start construction. So that's the money we're waiting for. So I believe, and I'll try to double check. I believe the design work has been ongoing, but I think it has to go through for it to really enter in the construction phase. We have to get this new start construction funding.
Right, very important. Thank you.
And Board Member Country, it'll work in concert with the two legislative bills I referenced, AB 921 and SB 901.
Well, we can ask for and hope for action soon. Important projects that need to get going.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything further, Mr. Soon?
Yes, please. I'd like to go ahead and continue. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you very much. Okay, so as all this is happening, we're also looking at the new WRDA, the next version of WRDA, WRDA 2022. And at this time, we've been working closely with Todd Bernardi and Laura Hollander at DWR on excess credits. You may recall the recent House Transportation Infrastructure Committee held a hearing on the WRDA 2022 and received testimony from our very own Secretary Crowfoot. And Secretary Crowfoot referenced in his remarks the need for or the request for the federal government to consider the excess credit issue that our state and local partners here are raising. And that is, from a state level, we have over $200 million that we believe we've earned in front-loading federal projects that provide flood protection for the area in excess of our federal cost share. And so these are these are monies and credits that we would like to utilize in other projects. And so we're working on legislation that will help secure those credits and ensure that we're able to make full use of those credits before a deadline of 2024 that is currently on the books. So we've submitted language with Senators Feinstein, Senator Padilla's office, and then as of today, this week, we were working with Congresswoman Matsui, who we want to take a moment to thank her for relentless leadership in supporting flood protection for this Sacramento region. And also, we've worked with Congressman Gary Mendy. I think I said Secretary Matsui, I meant Congresswoman Matsui, but I also want to thank Congresswoman Gary Mendy on his support as well. I received word this morning that Congresswoman Matsui will be submitting our request for word of language about this, as well as a shared submission from Congressman Gary Mendy. So that's very powerful, I think, when you have two congresspersons submitting something on behalf of the state of California. So we'll continue to monitor that as well. Also, Congressman Gary Mendy requested our support, and we intend to offer that of this language that you see here. This is and this is not a typo. It's from the Water Resources and Reform Development Act of 2014, an amendment for Section 1043. This is a useful tool that non-federal sponsors can use that will make permanent a program that would allow non-federal sponsors to plan and construct authorized federal projects. So we talked about earlier with West Sacramento, we're relying on Corps funding for design and construction, and the Army Corps typically does that. This would enable us to, under certain circumstances, be able to plan and construct and project manage authorized projects on our own. So it could be a very useful tool. It was a pilot program. This request from Congressman Graves, and we anticipate it'll be a bipartisan support. Have bipartisan support for this language. We would like to offer our support on this. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. And then finally, a while back, there was a lot of questions around the risk rating 2.0 and its reliance on the National Levy Database. I wanted to inform the board that we're working closely with the Central Valley Flood Control Association and DWR in trying to get a better understanding of the National Levy Database and how it is used in Risk Rating 2.0. We're working with the Ryan Larson at the Army Corps, as well as FEMA, to conduct a workshop with some of the stakeholders and ourselves to better understand this, and then we hope to disseminate what we learn at a future meeting. With that, I'll stop there for any questions.
Aha. Any questions, board members? Questions, comments? Anyone from the audience? Mr. Gooley, your hand is up on this as well?
Yeah, I have a question. Regarding the new Risk 2.0, I briefly read through the flyer that was sent out, and I noticed the database they refer to a lot, and I'm just curious how how it figures in with non-project levies, because here in Stockton we have a lot of non-project levies, and I'm wondering how the data for non-project levies gets figured into the equation for assessing flood insurance rate maps.
I appreciate that question, Mr. Gooley. I am certainly in this board is not the expert on that. We were looking to better understand the National Levy Database and how it is used in Risk Rating 2.0 for project and non-project levies. We'd be happy to follow up with you when we're able to learn more.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, I think that's one of the questions everyone's trying to sort out with this 2.0. Lots of uncertainty and concern. So thank you for that. Mr. Countryman? Is that your hand?
There you go. Darren, I didn't ask, when you went through the state legislation, there was a bond. I can't remember the number now.
AB 2387, yes.
Yeah,
Would
we'll
that
see.
provide a source of funding for updating our designated floodways?
That's not how it's stated in bond measure at this time, Board Member Countryman. This is also something that as it moves through, I would seek board support and engagement in the legislature on how this thing moves forward, and perhaps inputting text that would allow for that. So it's definitely something we can and should explore. I think there's a lot of conversations that have evolved since the original drafting of that bond language, and we know more today. I think there's other priorities that we can use funding for, and I think that's certainly worth a conversation with the folks in the Capitol.
Yes, I mean, as you know, we've had some workshops and so forth on our designated floodway. So the board is now aware that we have some significant, well, let's just say outdated floodplains that are to be administered. And it's going to be very important to try to find a source of funding to do that update. So thank you for looking at that for us.
Absolutely, and totally agree.
Our experience is that there's quite a journey between a potential bond being introduced and when it is finalized. But yes, thank you, Mr. Countryman. We certainly are aware that after 50 years of no look, no update, that the designated floodway analysis we've been able to do so far shows work is necessary and resources are needed to continue that. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, your slides disappeared, so you must be finished there.
We are done. Thank you so much. Unless there's any further questions. Board
Member Grego has a question.
Yeah, when do you anticipate coming back to the board to give us an update on the 2.0?
I have some preliminary dates in the end of March timeframe where we think that we can get the stakeholders together with the Army Corps and FEMA. So my hope would be perhaps, in the following months after that.
Thank you, Darren.
So my understanding is this 2.0 takes effect April of this year. Is that correct?
I hope not.
Well, I believe it took effect, but there was new policies versus old policies, and I apologize. I don't recall the details of which one happens in April.
Thank you.
There are a lot of email back and forth and questions on that. I think a lot of folks still have questions. So I think the workshop parties would be very helpful.
Yes, we are definitely striving, to your point, Board Member Grego, we're definitely striving to have an understanding of this before folks that assessment comes up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I see none of that, but I want you two gentlemen to know that there are comments in the chat thanking you for your presentations as being very helpful.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. We're ready to move to item number 8. Item number 8. I put this on another piece of paper and the numbers got wrong. Sorry. Item number 8, United States Army Corps of Engineers. This is an informational item. So I'll turn to board staff, Eric Meow, did I say it right? Eric can introduce this. Yes. Mr. Meow, good morning.
Good morning.
So spiffy with your tie, thank you.
Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. My name is Eric Mao, and I would like to introduce Mr. Juan Gonzalez from the United States Army Corps of Engineers, or USACE. Juan is the inspection, I'm just going to give a quick intro for the team. Juan is the inspection section chief of the USACE Sacramento district, and in October 2019, his team inspected the Sac River West Bank levee system. These federal inspections can affect a levee system's active or inactive status under PL 8499, Public Law 8499. This system is about 120 miles in length, and it's comprised of 8 segments, which are operated and maintained by several reclamation districts and other agencies. The levee system is currently under PLA 8499. It's currently active, so it's an active system. The system has an approved letter of intent and have submitted a system-wide improvement framework, a SWIFT document. Mr. Juan Gonzalez will be giving a PowerPoint presentation on his inspection findings. Board staff was provided copies of this final inspection report on January 26, 2022, and those were immediately shared with our local maintaining agencies. Board staff's roles in these inspections includes providing a contact list of the LMAs and gathering these documents such as board permits, DWR levy logs, as-builts, drawings, also USEP pipe records, and we provide that to the Army Corps team. We are also typically present in these levee inspection, and we coordinate with the LMAs to ensure USACE and their contractors have proper access to the levee. Board staff also reviews the draft and final inspection reports, and we compile these comments with the LMAs, and we send them to the Corps. So with that, I'd like to turn this time over to Juan as he begins his presentation regarding the findings of the Sac River West Bank levee system. And after the presentation, I believe the local maintaining agencies, they may have a few comments for the Corps as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you for that introduction. If somebody can please just ensure that you can hear me.
I can, so I see thumbs up, so please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and present the inspection results on the Sacramento River West Bank levee system. Appreciate the opportunity. Eric, thank you for the introduction. I think that's helpful to demonstrate how we've been working together, working with board staff, working with the tools that you guys also provide us, and so those are valuable assets that we do rely on, and so I think that's important for the board to understand. So I appreciate that. The slide that's up here now, this is a map showing the Sacramento River West Bank levee system. There are 8 levee segments which comprise of this levee system, and so as Eric mentioned, there's about 120 miles of levee here, which does span across 3 counties, Glenn, Colusa, as well as Yolo County, all within Northern California. And so the system does reduce risk for areas like the town of Colusa. The area behind the levee is primarily agricultural, and the levees provide, I guess, protection or reduced flood risk from the Sacramento River as well as the Colusa Drain Canal. On the next slide, this is what we would refer to as the report card. And so you might recall that the Corps, we don't give system ratings anymore, and so we don't have that shown here. The system is currently active in the PL 8499 rehabilitation program. They are active under an approved LOI. I'll just acknowledge here that we have we are in receipt of a SWIFT, and so that SWIFT is routing for review, and we expect it to ultimately be sent up to headquarters for approval, USACE headquarters. And then to explain this table a little bit, I just want to mention that there's eight segments here that make up the system, and so those are shown in the columns. Names listed there at the top of the table, and then we've got item categories that were observed during the field inspection. So those are shown on the left-hand side in the rows, and so there are 7 items in those rows that do affect PL 849 eligibility. Those 7 items are labeled in the far left column. And then ratings given are shown in the legend. And so we've got A's for acceptable, M's for minimally acceptable, U's for unacceptable, and then NA for items that were not applicable. I do want to point out that it's important to note that pipe penetrations that went through the levee were actually captured under the encroachment items. And so that's why the culvert discharge item is not applicable all the way across. And so individual ratings within each box, and so those ratings in each box correspond to the lowest rating for that item for that corresponding segment.
We seem to have lost your audio clarity. Are you there?
Can you hear me still? Hi, can you hear me?
Just barely.
Sorry, give me 30 seconds.
That seems better. You think?
No.
No?
Okay, can you hear me better?
Is there any way you can increase your volume on your end? Boy, I'll be happy when this is over. We're aiming toward April to bring you on in person.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, can you hear me better?
Yes, that is better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. I had to switch to my backup.
We all understand. Okay, please proceed.
All right, so I'm gonna pick up where I left off. Let me know if you missed anything. I just want to speak to quickly. I'll go back a little bit. Columns are the segments. Rows are the item ratings which were observed in the field. Individual ratings are within the box for the lowest rating that was provided for that item for that corresponding segment. Legend there has the AMU ratings: acceptable, minimally acceptable, unacceptable, and then colors. I do want to point out that the unacceptable observations are broken up into severity. And so orange would be likely prevents performance in the next flood event, whereas the unacceptable purple is not likely to prevent performance in the next flood event. I also want to point out that this captured within this inspection observation, we do have 2 flood damage sites that were from 2019 flood event, and so those were submitted through the board to the Corps for a request to repair under the Public Law 8499 Rehabilitation Program. And so those sites are captured within this report, as a snapshot in time, and so it's just showing the condition of the levee at the time of the inspection. And I should also mention that, we acknowledge that there's been challenges to process this request for repairs. We're working on it. We're working on hopefully a decision here in March on the PIRs that are currently being worked on. And we've been in contact with the board, staff, and maintaining agencies on the status. Lastly, before we move on to the next slide, I just want to mention that we did see overall significant improvement on this levee system. Many individual observations, a large percentage of the observations that we saw in the last inspection during the periodic inspection have been resolved. And so it may not be apparent looking at this slide because this is just kind of showing the lowest rating. It doesn't show quantity, anything like that. And so I just want to acknowledge that, we've seen a lot of progress towards correcting unacceptable observation. We appreciate the maintaining agency and the board staff who have, been working with us, interacting with us to make those improvements and that progress. So we appreciate that. On the next slide, I'm showing 4 pictures here. This is the last slide. And so these slides, these pictures are intended to show kind of an example of what we saw during the inspection. And so I could have picked other pictures and thrown them up on the slide, but I think these are good represented pictures of the types of things that we're seeing. And so top left picture, this is a culvert that's going through the pipe, or excuse me, a culvert going through the levee, and it's got a pipe in a pipe. And so obviously the larger pipe has no closure because of the pipe in the pipe situation. And so the ability of that water side closure to actually close is not there, at least during the inspection. We did see other pipes during the inspection that had issues like sedimentation buildup, either filling up the pipe completely or partially, or sedimentation building up against the closures, the flap gates, the land side and water side. And so those are the types of things we saw with pipes and more, but we saw some slide gates that were completely buried in sedimentation. And so, there may be a question of, are some of those pipes functional? Are those closures open or closed? And so we're trying to ensure that water is not passing from the water side to the land side. Top right photo is an erosion observation. We're looking at the water side, lower slope of the water side embankment. And so you can see that there's erosion several feet into the levee embankment. And so obviously that's something that should be taken care of to prevent further erosion into the levee embankment before it gets worse. Bottom left photo. What we're trying to show here is this is the land side toe of the levee embankment, and so there's an excavation that it appears that a ditch was excavated at this location, and so it does encroach into the levee embankment itself. And so obviously there's concern there that levee embankment material is being removed to create this ditch. Bottom right photo. So there were several retaining walls, I would say in the ballpark of 15 to 20 retaining walls of various heights, various locations within the levee embankment, and they all seem to reduce the levee prism. And so this particular one that I'm showing you on the bottom right is a concrete retaining wall several feet tall. It does have cracks in it. Several areas of the retaining wall have actually fallen over. And so obviously we're concerned there with with those failures. And then some of those retaining walls are unpermitted. And so just looking at, you know, the integrity, the ability for the levee itself to perform with those retaining walls. And so with that, I will stop, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you for that. You may want to put those up again. Mr. Countryman has questions on IC. Joe. And then Tim Ramirez, and then Megan Nagy. So Mr. Countryman.
Could you show the previous slide, please? My concern here is the encroachment one, which shows unsatisfactory all the way across every RD. And I think when you were having some sound trouble, I think you were explaining that the encroachments include the pipes through the levee. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we do categorize pipe penetrations into the encroachment category.
Is it possible to separate the encroachments into two categories, pipes and everything else? It seems like that's a special category that's being taken care of, whereas, you know, other encroachments would be like a building that's encroached in the levee or something like that. It might make it more clear what's actually the problem with encroachments. It's hard to understand it with just that one item.
I understand, and I appreciate that comment. And so we've got a database that backs up this data, and so that database does identify the types of encroachments, and so it does go into further detail. And so, you know, obviously that database as well as the report itself identifies those differences.
So Mr. Gonzalez, is this like a summary chart or spreadsheet here, and then there's backup information that details why the ratings are what they are? Is that right?
That is true. And so the report itself is probably about 1,700 pages. And this is just a large system. And so for each of those observations, we've got a remarks, a rating, identifier for location, lat longs, levee miles. And so the details needed to identify why an individual observation is unacceptable, or given that specific rating is within the remarks.
Okay.
Maybe can you just give me an idea of like what percent of the encroachments are due to pipes and versus everything else?
I'm sorry, I don't have that percentage off the top of my head. We do have, like I said, we do have the database that I guess board staff can also look at. We've provided, I believe we've provided it to them. We can provide it if we haven't. But you know, we're obviously capturing all the pipe penetrations through the levee.
Right.
Okay, maybe we could forward the 1,700 pages to Mr. Countryman. I'm kidding. Mr. Ramirez, do you have a question or a comment?
I do, and it's not about getting the report. Thank you, President Dolan.
All right.
It was nice to say, President Dolan. I'm having a little bit of a flashback. I don't know if anybody else is, from maybe 10 years ago when we started to get these reports, except the color codes changed. We didn't have SWIFTs then, we do now. And my questions are about that. There's 8 segments here. Can you just remind me if this is one collective SWIFT with all of these different entities? And if also there's any sense of a pattern or change here from the previous inspection on the report card?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Ramirez. Thank you for that question. So we are one system here that we're presenting on, and so it would need to be under one LOI, one SWIFT. And so it is one LOI, one SWIFT that was submitted, or excuse me, yes, that's correct. One LOI was approved for this entire system. One SWIFT is being looked at for this system. The other part of your question is about the colors. And so we haven't changed our criteria, inspection criteria, and how we inspect levees. It has been consistent since the last time we inspected. The color change here is actually a result of being active under an LOI. And so we use orange and purple when systems are active under an LOI or SWIFT versus red and yellow, which you may remember from the last inspection when they're not under a SWIFT.
Okay, actually very helpful. I didn't know that. My question was more about the pattern. From the last inspection, are we seeing more unacceptable ratings here or less? Or do you have a sense of the direction things are going? Is it better or worse than the last time?
Okay, thank you. Now I understand. We did see overall the system have improvements, and so we had about. I was looking at this, trying to get an understanding of how many points were resolved or improved, and so the system being so large, 120 miles, we saw about, and I see Megan saying she can help answer that, and so I want to say in the ballpark about 1,500 points system wide that were improved or resolved.
Thank you.
Is that it? Tim? Okay, Megan Nagy, you are up.
Okay, I'll start with Tim's question, and I don't think I can share my screen. I took this report card that was just released for this inspection, and I compared it to the 2012 report card and color coded it based on whether the item within each segment improved, stayed the same, or got worse. So if I can share my screen, I can share that table. If not, then there were 10 items across the board that saw improvement for at least one segment, or in some cases, all of the segments. There were 4 items that had something get worse. And if you look at it from within the whole table on an individual basis, there's 59 improvements versus 9 getting worse. So it was a significant improvement from the 2012 perspective. I did not do an evaluation down to the individual item level to see how many improvements, but within the report card, I was glad to see our system had generally improved across the board.
Well, we would love to see that. If you could transmit that in some way to staff.
Eric has it, so he can, I think Angles has it as well.
Oh, good, thank you.
So they can share that with you guys and show, and we'll plan to use that as we, once the SWIFT gets approved and we're doing our annual progress reports, we can use that to show the improvements that have been made. The other item, Juan hit on this. I had let him know that I was going to bring this up, but I do want to, the slope stability in RD 108, you can see on the report card that it is an orange U. That is driven 100% by storm damage from 2019, 2 sites that are eligible for PL 8499. And unfortunately, the Corps has yet to repair those. We are now 4 years from the time of the event, and we are still waiting for the Corps to even approve the PIR to even start the design and the process of getting this fixed. We were recently told by board staff that the Corps had pushed this now to 2023 repair. And every year that goes by, we run the risk of the Corps running out of funds, as well as, we agree with this. These two sites are likely to prevent the system from performing. And we've just been lucky that we haven't had rain in 2 years from a stability standpoint. So those are urgent, we agree, and request your help to get the Corps to move along and get these fixed. And if we can get these repaired this year, we really should. These are not difficult sites to repair.
Well said.
And then on encroachments, we look forward to working with your staff to address, as we said, a lot of these are pipes, the orange category. They mainly, in our district, I did not have districts, both Sac River Westside Levy District and RD 108. I evaluated the encroachment data. Most of the orange encroachments fall into the categories of pipes, ditches, toe cuts. And there are a few retaining walls, like 2 or 3 retaining walls within our districts. But for the most part, it's within those categories. So we look forward to working with the board on helping resolve that. And we do intend to use this new inspection report as a catalyst to reaching out to our landowners who are adjacent to the levees, to educate them on the responsibilities as well as what was identified specifically within their parcels. And if they have things that they want to get rid of and they need assistance, and it's relatively easy for us, that we're going to help those landowners. And so that's our intent moving forward. Happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you for that input. We appreciate it, and certainly understand it. Or I do. Mr. List has his hand up. He could probably answer some of the questions or augment the information. Mr. List?
Yes, thank you. So as you see, May 1 and May 12 participated in this system with RD 108, Sacramento River West Levy District, various Glenn County districts and Fair. So we have 2 maintenance areas in this location, and you can see on this report card some orange U's, and we take those very seriously. So the one thing to keep in mind is this is a 2019 and early 2020 inspection. We were able to obtain the data earlier in the process from through our interaction. So Megan and her consultant is the lead agency for our SWIFT preparation process. DWR as MA1 and MA12 participate with that process. And so we, as a team, got that data, and we began addressing those items that are maintenance deficiencies that we could address. So really the highest priority items would be those that affect PLA 499 eligibility, encroachments, enclosure structures, stability, erosion bank caving, animal control, culverts, discharge pipes, which, as Juan pointed out, are in encroachments, and then under seepage relief wells. So and just for order of magnitude and kind of to address board member Countryman's question on things, we do sort them into categories that are highest threat to levee integrity. We separate out pipes internally. We have programs, DMP pipes, to help the LMAs and DWR address those system features that are pipes. I wouldn't categorize all pipes as encroachments. Some are system features, some are encroachments. But for MA1, there was 467 identified encroachments in that area. When we're talking about 14 slope stability, 3 erosion bank caving, 24 animal control is just an example. So DWR, since the time of the inspection, has addressed 100% of the slope stability items in our area. We've addressed 100% of the erosion bank caving, and we've addressed 100% of the animal control through our active process. We could resolve some encroachments. Some of the encroachments are things like debris piles that someone might leave on or near the levee. So we address those. Toe cuts, we address those because that's an annual maintenance practice that we take care of. But those encroachments that really our board staff are going to have to enforce or assist, as Megan said, We'll begin working with board staff again to get those items that are unresolved from the encroachment category resolved. So, and then from an MA12 perspective, 168 encroachment items were identified. We had 2 acceptable slope stability, but we've addressed those as well. Erosion bank caving 17 and 29 animal control. And again, the erosion bank caving and animal control has been addressed in MA12 as a routine annual maintenance activity. So we keep up on those. So if the Corps were to look at it, we would still have the same report card for encroachments. It would still be an orange U because there are hundreds, literally thousands of encroachments in this system. The 2 subsets of the system, the segments that DWR operates and maintains as MA1 and 12, are a proportion of that. So as far as maintenance practices in this area, when the original periodic inspection came out, we met with all of the districts. That's when the RD 108 staff and Sacramento River West Side Levee District staff determined who was going to be the lead. We participated with that group and put an LOI in, and as you heard, a SWIF is in hand at the Corps waiting for final approval, and we'll continue to work through this process on our annual maintenance practices. And, you know, again, the board staff working on encroachments will get a large influx of work over the next couple of years, because this is one of many systems. One of about a dozen DWR participates in, either as an individual system that DWR has on the whole, or as one we participate in with other local maintaining agencies. So encroachments will always be a long game item that has to be addressed, and we will do worst first, or we would recommend a worst first addressing practice by the board. Any questions for me, I can answer them. Otherwise, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. We do like to hear from folks who work on the ground, so these reports have some context for our analysis. Mr. Councilman, do you still have some more questions? And then I'll call on Mr. Barry O'Regan. Joe?
Well, thank you, Madam President. I have to plead ignorance about this, but I thought SWIFTs were like by district, but this includes a tremendous area. How is that managed? Is there a management team put together by all the districts to manage the SWIFT, or how does that work?
Very carefully. Who wants to take that one on? I know that this happens, and these districts are connected, and so they do work together.
I'll take that one since we're the lead. So when all of these districts agreed that they wanted to move forward with the SWIFT, well, let me step back. The Corps requires that a SWIFT be on a system basis. So you cannot submit a SWIFT as an individual district if you're part of a larger system. So to submit a SWIFT, the group of LMAs that are in that system have to all agree that they're willing to work together towards a SWIFT. So this particular system, this group decided that they wanted to move forward a SWIFT. It was before I started to work at 108. And at the time, 108 and Sac River Westside Levee District agreed to step up as the lead agency. They had to get a letter of support from the other maintaining agencies within the system. And then at that point, we then use our consultant to develop the SWIFT while working with all of those entities on how we're going to do that. And then we'll do the same as we move forward with progress reports. We will work together to show our progress. Our consultant reaches out to the others. And we're all part of the Mid and Upper Sac region, so we work together all the time anyway. So that's
wow.
Thank you.
Impressive.
Yeah. Mr. O'Regan, good morning.
Thank you, President Dolan. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Barry O'Regan. I'm with Council Seneca Newdeck, and we are the district engineer for a number of the districts within the SWIFT, and we help prepare the LOI and the SWIFT. working with Sac River Westside Levy District. And to address some of Mr. Ramirez and Mr. Countryman's comments, Mr. Ramirez, I think this system, as the district engineer for much of the system, is vastly improved over what it has been. And I think this system can be, I see it as a poster child for how these issues can be managed here. And the key part of that is leadership, especially local leadership. And I think, without leadership, nothing happens. And the leadership shown by Sac River Westside Levy District to first step up and say, we'll take on the LOI, we'll take on the SWIFT when others wouldn't within the system. And I think they were maybe one of the first, if not the first, LOI and SWIFT in Northern California, to take that effort on and to work with the other LMAs to get that done. So these improvements we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years wouldn't occur without that leadership, and it's so critical. And so that leadership has to be supported at the state level, because if you don't support that leadership, people won't take on that role. They won't step up to take on that mantle. And I think that's really important to think about as policies and practices are taken at the state level. And so when I say this is a poster child for how this system can work, because it's a combination of local effort with local funding combined with state funding and also federal funding. So by the little bit of background here, this LOI was submitted prior to the 2017 flood, and by regaining eligibility, the system was able to be qualified for our PL 8499 assistance after the 2017 event. And that's made a huge difference, and Megan has the numbers, but a significant federal investment has occurred because that LOI was put forward. And so again, that gets back to leadership, right? Somebody said, we'll stick our head up and we'll put that LOI in, and that resulted in significant improvements to the system that are ongoing after the 17. I think they're all done now, but maybe there's one left. But we've had some of the worst parts of this system have been repaired through the PL 8499 program. In addition to that, the state has programs, both the FMAP program, the Deferred Maintenance Program, and the FSRP program have really contributed to significant improvements in the system. So again, it's the state providing significant resources for locals to get work accomplished on the ground. And so we're seeing significant improvements there. But one of the challenges we're having right now is that, and also through the Small Communities Program, where we're looking at solving some issues that address the small communities within this region through state funding through the Small Communities Program. But one of the challenges we're having is that the state policies and practices for payment and reimbursement on many of these grant programs really place a burden on rural LMAs to cash flow projects, and cash flowing significant capital improvement projects is a challenge. So many of these districts are going in debt that is not reimbursable, that they have to ease to fund the cash flow for capital projects that are funded through state funding and also some federal funding too. So we're, through Sac River Westside Levy District has started a conversation with the state about looking at how to help local districts manage that issue. And it's a real challenge, and people are shying away from the type of projects that we need to address these unacceptable items, because they essentially, not they don't want to do the work, but they can't cash flow the work. And they don't have the resources to cash flow. So it seems like a little bit of an upside down system where the money is in the bank, we can't do the work because the people who were writing the backhoe don't have enough money to cash flow the work. So we really need some help at that end to make sure that local LMAs who, with the proper leadership, can take on and address these unacceptable items, so that the next time you see this report, hopefully these orange items won't be as prominent, but we need some help with that.
Thank you for bringing that issue forward. It gets talked about at the regional flood management groups quite a bit, but thank you for bringing that forward. At some point, we're going to need to highlight that. Mr. Ramirez, are you back up?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both Barry and Mark for their comments and remind us that when we collectively decided that the SWIFT was a path forward to keep systems in the federal program, we just bought ourselves time, right? There's a boatload of work that has to be done still. And one of the big topics, 10 years ago when this started was the vegetation issue, which just like encroachments is all used all the way across, right? So we've hit on sort of the two key things that were problems then that are still problems now, and they both take time and money, and maybe some creativity as well on the permitting side to deal with vegetation. So it sounds like people are making progress, which is great, and it's really helpful to have people chime in here about some of those details and remind us, what's in front of us and the work that needs to be done still. The program's still eligible for assistance, which is great, but as we just heard, there's a lot of work that needs to get done, and we have to figure out how to navigate those things and bring resources to bear, and maybe get creative about the permitting and the environmental issues. But I'm grateful for the folks that chimed in here to provide that context. It is a good example. It's so complicated, both technically and also institutionally, with so many parties involved. And I think we do want to provide whatever assistance we can along the way. So thanks for this update. I really appreciate it.
Well said. Board Member Grego has a question.
First, I'd like to, thank you, say that this graph was, the color coding on it was really easy for me to read. It shows where the importance is at. The other thing I want to comment on is we were asked to help in regards to funding for the core, the PL 8499 program. I'm not sure how we do that, but I mean, if there's a way for us to help, I would be all for that, because these repairs that require, some assistance, it was stated that there's money is needed in order to do not only the maintenance, but the repairs when there's flood water. And to let it go on for that many years only makes the matter worse. And so if there's a way, and I'm not sure, I'm the newest board member here, so I'm not familiar with how that goes, but my understanding is that this program is there for those districts that work on these type of maintenance programs to have the money. And so I'm not sure, if it's a budget thing, that there's just not enough money at the end of the day to address these type of work projects. And so I'm interested to know more about that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, when you share this LOI, do you also share in like equipment or staff that work, through this area of maintenance? I was curious if you do that as well. And then the last thing is, how long do these SWIFT or LOIs last? Do they last until the next inspection, or is there a time limit on those?
The time limit is longer. Mr. O'Regan, can you answer if everyone coordinates maintenance activities? I know LP1 and Glenn has no staff.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to, I see Megan has her hand up there. She's probably better suited to answer that question.
As far as shared maintenance, RD108 and Sacramento River Westside Levee District have worked together since our Sac River Westside Levee District was founded in 1915. So we have always shared staff and equipment as far as those districts. And I'm sure the MAs, that's all one and the same. So that's that crew is similar. LD1 and LD2, they perform their own work, as well as RD787. That said, RD787 is sandwiched right between RD108 and Sac River Westside Levee District. If they ever needed assistance, they'd reach out and we all help each other. So that's super easy. For us to get up to Glenn County is a little bit tougher, but we all work together if we need to get things accomplished. We did work together on the emergency response planning. All of that was done also as a system. That was an area where we improved across the board. And we, RD-108 does store some of the emergency supplies for some of those LD1 and LD2, and would hope get that to them when they need to. So we do work together on that aspect. As far as PL 8499 and how you can help, I really appreciate that. At this point, it's not a funding issue at this point. It's really, I think, a leadership engagement assistance that we need at this point. We need help in engaging the Corps. As the LMA, we can't, we don't have an avenue to have that direct engagement with the Corps. We have to go through the board as the non-federal sponsor. And so having the leadership engagement to find out what is taking so long and what we can do and how we can assist to move this process forward is really, I think, what we need at this point is some leadership engagement. So I appreciate you asking that question. I think there was a third, and now I can't remember what the third.
I mean, how long does a SWIFT do and how long do they last?
Yeah, so the SWIFT, the SWIFT timelines are different based on each SWIFT. So within a SWIFT, you recommend how long it's going to take your system to come up to speed to get all your U's corrected, but it's not tied to an inspection or anything like that. So basically, you put in the SWIFT that it's going to, and I mean, these SWIFTs are very long term. However, you do have to submit an annual progress report to show that you're making progress, and the Corps will evaluate that annually to make sure that you're moving forward on a worst first basis to make improvements as a whole.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to ask that our staff engage the Corps on regards to this request that has been made today, and see if we can't help them out on that. Thank you.
Yes, we put a star for that. Now, Mr. Young, you put your hand up, but it came down. Is that right? Oh, no, that's our staff. Eric, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, President Dolan.
Thank you.
Staff, we have been engaging with the Corps' SPK team, along with Megan, to talk about these PIR sites. I did want to reiterate what Megan said was true, that every year the Corps requests an annual progress report, and during the LOI and SWIFT document process, there's an estimate of how long it takes to repair those encroachments. 5 years, 10 years, 15. It depends on each system. Each system is different, and also the Corps, as they review that, they have the opportunity to deny that or ask why it would take that long. So, I guess the Corps does have the power to, revoke the SWIFT, but that hasn't happened to any of our systems yet. All of our SWIFTs and all of our levy systems have been very active in trying to make improvements, as Mark and Megan have shared. But I just wanted to confirm what Megan said was accurate, and that we are actively engaging with Corps staff regarding these PIRs. We are doing our best to push it, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
PIR is
the Project Information Report. This is when an active PL 8499 site has been damaged, President Dolan, and the Corps comes in to do a PIR, kind of this report to see does it fit the criterias of damage, and do we want to, what possible fixes are there for this site, and then they request that up to their division and headquarters for approval of funds to repair those damaged sites.
Thank you. Mr. O'Regan, are you back up?
Yeah, thank you, President Dolan. Just a couple of things there I just want to bring up. You mentioned the regional flood management process, and that is critical for our region. So thank you to the board for continuing to support that, and also to the Department of Water Resources, Chris Williams and Aaron Wu over there who run that program. Without that program, a lot of the coordination that Megan referred to and Mr. Countryman asked about wouldn't be able to happen. So thank you for that. The other issue that I wanted to just mention, we talked a little bit about encroachments as a challenging thing to resolve. The other big issue for us, one that keeps me awake at night, is erosion, because erosion repairs are very difficult and extremely expensive, and often beyond the resources of the LMA. And it's kind of further complicated in the Sac River system, where the channel is a 8361 responsibility of the state, and the levees are a responsibility of the LMA. So it becomes a chicken and egg situation as to when is something channel erosion versus levee erosion, and do you let the channel erosion go until it becomes a levee problem? And so that becomes always an interesting conversation on how we address that. But so that's a challenge for us there. And the other thing too is the expense. One of Megan's other hats she wears is the deputy manager for Nice Landing Ridge Drainage District, which is not a part of this system. And there we have erosion issues that we're trying to deal with. And so again, that board stepped out in front and undertook an erosion repair program. We just got off the phone this week, and we learned that the mitigation cost, just the mitigation cost to address that erosion, is going to be $120 to $200 a linear foot. That's just erosion. Or sorry, $1,000 to $1,200 per linear foot. So over $1,000 a foot for mitigation alone. So often, LMAs just cannot afford to take on projects like that. And the SAC Bank program, which was critical to undertaking levee repairs through here, the Corps went through a process where they looked at it by basin, and Mr. Countryman, I'm sure, knows more about this than I do, but it really is a system-wide improvement. SAC Bank should be looked as a system, not individual basins within the system. Just as DWR, just as the Corps looks at this as a system of levees here, you see they asked us to do SWIFT for a system, but when they went in and did SAC Bank, they started breaking it down by basin, and that's really hurt the cost-benefit approach. And really, cost benefit should not be an issue when you're doing system maintenance. So we'll be working as part of the LMA, all of the RFMPs, Mid and Upper Sac, Feather River, and Lower Sac RFMPs have been talking about working with the state and with the federal government to address erosion within the system, because these purple U's you see here will not go away if it's left, if locals have to deal with that on erosion. They just do not have the resources to deal with that. Thank you.
We hear you. Making progress, much to do. I see no more hands raised. Any board members want to continue this? Staff?
Madam President, could I just mention, since you said you weren't monitoring the chat, there were two items in the chat. One from Eric Mao. The LOI was this system was approved by USACE headquarters in 2015. That was an item. And then Mark List said the state cost share for PL 8499 has been provided.
Okay.
Just for your information.
And good news. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's too difficult to monitor hands up, the video and the chat. So I gave that to Big Guns. It's 10:30, so we have a choice to either go swiftly with the DWR items and break, or break now. Mr. Rothert, how long are you going to take?
Good morning, President Dolan. I won't take very long, but
Happy
Jason.
To see you, by the way, so thank you.
Sorry?
We're happy to see you, so thank you for being
here. No, of course. Happy to see you and your colleagues as well. I don't have a long presentation at all, just to introduce Jason Sidley and set his update on the development of the 2022 CVFPB. So, but I think he'll have 10 or 15 minutes of discussion. But we're at your wishes. We can break now or go forward.
Let's go with Mr. Sidley, then we'll take a break.
Okay, great. Thank you, President Dolan. And let me just say, on behalf of all of my colleagues at DWR, congratulations on your appointment as president of the board. And we really look forward to working with you and benefiting from your vast experience with the board and as in service to California, which I think you said on the tour of the Smith Canal Gate project that you are among the longest serving public servants in California. And so you've got a lot of experience and perspective and knowledge to bring to this position. And we look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
Of course. So I don't have a report to provide on progress on DWR-wide projects and programs. We have been making lots of incremental progress on any number of elements of our work that we do in collaboration with the board, but nothing that rose to the level of a distinct update for you this morning. So what we do have, though, is an update from Jason Sidley, who's in my division of multi-benefit initiatives, and he is the leader of the team developing the 2022 update of the flood protection plan. And he's going to give you an update on progress over the last month and what to look forward to in coming months. So Jason, looks like you're ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. And we get your written report, which is very informational and helpful. We appreciate that on a monthly basis. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right. 2022 plan update. Mr. Sidley.
Good morning. I think, yes, good morning, President Dolan. I think Mary Jimenez is actually going to open with a few words.
All right. Let me back up to Mary Jimenez. I see one or the other of you almost every other day, right?
It seems like it, yes, for sure.
Mary.
Yes, thank you very much, President Dolan. Very pleased to hear the news today as well. Yeah, just a couple opening remarks before handing off to Jason and Ruth. So pleased to be here again this month to brief the board on our continued development of the 2022 update of the flood plan. As our division manager Rothert mentioned, Jason will give the bulk of the presentation today. A bit of a detailed look into how we're addressing comments on the working draft to provide a responsive public draft, and also how we're filling some of the key content gaps that we recognized were still missing back in the fall. And then also, as always, I'm here with our key team member, Ruth Darling from Flood Board staff, so that she can give an update on where we're going in terms of beginning the public process that will be led by the board this year. So thank you very much again for having us. Congratulations, President Dolan and board member of Alliance. Jason, if you're ready, go for it. Thank you.
I think I am. Thank you very much, Mary. And once again, President Dolan, congratulations. And the rest of the board members, it's nice to see you this morning. My name is Jason Sidley with the Division of Multi-Benefit Initiatives. And I'm here to talk to you today, and you can see from the overview slide here, I'm going to give you a brief presentation or brief update on the conservation strategy, the status of the public draft, something a lot of us saw in the August or the previous coordinating committee discussion, where we are with regards to the process for the 2022 public draft update, and then where we're going, the next steps for that. So we can go to the next slide, please. So, and the next slide also, sorry. So a lot of you have seen this slide before. This is a slide that highlights a lot of the key components to the 2022 CVFPB update. A lot of these are being done in parallel, and some, coming out with the draft, the public draft, and some lagging a little bit behind. This part focuses on the conservation strategy. The conservation strategy supports all the CVFPB goals, but focuses specifically on promoting ecosystem functions and initiatives. Specifically, it looks at promoting natural dynamic hydrologic and geomorphic processes, the quality and quantity of all types of habitats, and notes the agricultural and ecological values of these habitats. It also promotes the recovery and stability of native species and overall biotic community diversity. The conservation strategy document aims to provide a guidance and toolkit on these on-the-ground efforts. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights of the 2022 conservation strategy update. The 2022 update incorporates new science since the 2016 strategy, with addition of 3 new species to our target species list, and an addition of climate change adaptation strategies. It identifies impediments to multi-benefit project implementation and also details potential multi-benefit funding sources that can be accessed. It describes the existing regulatory compliance effort. It also talks about the development of recommendations from numerous sources, including from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board Advisory Committee, and lays out priority actions. It contains information on adaptive management and performance tracking, and reports on where we are relative with a lot of the multi-benefit implementation efforts that are currently underway. Slide, please. The slide summarizes the revisions to the conservation strategy since the working draft. Broadly, as we considered comments, we made revisions throughout the document and then filled in data gaps from the working draft that we knew were going to be needed to be filled in before the public draft. The funding section, which was largely a placeholder in the working draft, has been significantly revised and done in coordination with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan's investment strategy and the funding plan development effort. We have revised our recommendations content. The recommendations and priority actions are from many sources, at least one I highlighted earlier, and an effort has been undertaken to make sure these recommendations are consistent with and included as necessary in the CVFPB update. Some of the sources of these recommendations are the advisory committee, the board advisory committee, the 2017 suite of documents, including the update and the 2016 conservation strategy and the investment strategy, the RFMP priorities white papers, the water resiliency portfolio, and other state strategic planning efforts. The recommendations incorporate comments from multiple interests, including state partner agencies, non-governmental organizations, tribes, which provided significant content or comments on the plan working draft, as well as local maintaining agencies and other interested parties. Next slide, please. The 2022 conservation strategy has been developed with a focus on implementing multi-benefit projects. The effort to date has included researching and developing relevant scientific information, collaborating and leveraging other programs and efforts, tracking and reporting progress on measurable objectives from recent implementation efforts towards our intended outcomes, providing a forum for advancing conservation strategy goals. Next slide, please. The public draft of the conservation strategy was released on December 10th, 2021. It's currently available. It was available and is currently still available on the DWR website, but we are no longer accepting comments on that draft at this time, but it is available for you to review. Comments or for you to look at. Comments were due on February 10th. We received a total of 9 sets of comments from our RFMP regions, other agency representatives, non-governmental agencies, and other interested parties. We are currently going through and putting together responses to those comments and working through the response to those comments and looking at ways to incorporate them not only into the final conservation strategy update, which will be coming out in the late fall, but also if there are pieces that need to be put into the main document, CVFPB main document before it goes out for public comment here in the next little bit. The 2022 final 2022 conservation strategy will be released in late 2022. Next slide, please. And we'll go to the next slide. So now an update on where we are with the 2022 update process. The working draft of the 2022 update was provided to our engaged stakeholders in October of 2021. We had a 30-day comment period. Similarly to the 2017 document, this draft was in 4 chapters. Chapter 1 being that context setting chapter, looking at the various themes that are going to be updated, having a little bit about the history of the plan and the need for the plan. Chapter 2 looked back at the implementation progress that has occurred since 2017 with regards to project implementation, various partnership efforts that were being undertaken, the policy issue recommendation development and implementation. So it gives that backwards look for us, as well as some of the analyses that have been done, including the development of the performance tracking system and the climate change analyses. Chapter 3 is that looking forward chapter. What needs to be done? What are we planning to do? That big picture look at those risks, priorities, portfolios, and outcomes, including a discussion on the updated SSIA portfolio effort. And then we have the moving forward, as we called it at the time, which is more of the implementation. How are we going to do it? How are we going to look to fund these efforts over a 30-year planning horizon? Next slide, please. The working draft was distributed electronically to about 400 specific contacts. And as I mentioned previous, there's a 30-day comment period. Additionally, we held over 15 stakeholder briefings, including to various CVFPB board venues, the Delta Stewardship Council, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in which we briefed not only the planning folks from the Sacramento district, but also the engineering with nature folks from the Corps, the national part, the Yolo Bypass Partnership, the regional flood management planning groups, and others. In addition, during the October-November timeframe, we held, I believe, around 13 or so elected officials briefings throughout with supervisors from various county boards and other municipalities throughout the valley. We are currently in the process of holding a second round of those. And in the first go around, it was asking for feedback on the working draft. The second go around is more of an informational briefing, highlighting similar to the discussion we're having today on what they can expect in the public draft. Reviewer guidance was, we provided a distribution list, and we provided reviewer guidance indicating the type of review we're looking for. Next slide, please. So from that review, we received a considerable amount of interest, and 20 sets of comments, 20 plus sets of comments have been received as of January 20th, resulting in approximately 430 individual comments. We asked the reviewers, as they provided their comments, to provide a rating of minor, moderate, or major in an order of importance for them. Out of the 430, approximately 15% were considered major importance. Also, out of the 430, about 20% of the comments focused on project portfolios and priorities, that section of the discussion in the plan. The policy issues and recommendations also constitute a significant amount of feedback, about 12%. And then the following categories each had about 35 or so comments, including agricultural sustainability, climate change, editorial or data accuracy, investment and financing, and shared responsibility and agency involvement. Next slide, please. So as of the January, well, as of February also, but as of January 20th, we've received comments from over 20 groups. You'll notice the number 20 is county elected officials outreach, and we received a few sets of comments based on those discussions. So we've received comments from the Army Corps SAC District, Engineering with Nature, several other, a couple of the other agencies that we deal with, the federal and state agencies, the RFMPs, and then a few of the other local agencies. So it's a good, very good level of interest and a lot of solid comments for sure. Next slide, please. So the team has been working really hard. We're currently finalizing up the addressing all of the comments. And the various ways in which we have addressed comments so far is we've incorporated substantial refinements based on a lot of these comments. We've also updated with new information and refined results, not only from the information that we've been developing as part of our technical data, but also from the comments themselves. We've addressed comments under a pretty tight schedule to get to this point where we're preparing that final public draft. Excuse me. Additionally, we've developed new spotlights on various topics. I think we've got about 11 spotlights in the document that highlight projects, partnerships, policy issues, those sort of things. And then we've gone through the process of identifying future follow-ups. There were several comments that, while important in the context of the planning framework itself, may not be able to be addressed in the 2022 based on the timeline, and we're something that we'll identify as something to look at 2027. Next slide, please. One topic we've been working hard to incorporate in the public draft is equity. An important aspect of alignment is a policy and path forward centered around equity, socially vulnerable communities, and recognizing flood risk vulnerabilities. The CVFPP can be a place to daylight some of this information, but the intent is for once the CVFPB comes out with the equity information that we're able to put into that document and recommendations moving forward, that will help inform the 2023 California Water Plan update that is currently underway. And they're going to be taking more of a statewide and other water sector focus on equity. Next slide, please. So a couple of the changes that you'll see in the public draft of the 2022 update beyond the refinements and content development are the new draft will include the forwards, the letters from the DWR director and the board president. There will also be at least a space for the action infographic, call to action infographic, but that is something that we are going to be developing in conjunction with the board during the public process. Additionally, you'll see the space for the 6 regional spotlights that the RF&P regions worked with the department to develop, and it really kind of puts a little highlight on each of the regions, priorities, opportunities, and challenges in each of those regions. Other thing to note is chapters 3 and 4, we had slight title changes from the previous draft, just to better reflect and highlight the content of those chapters and the story we are telling in those chapters. Additionally, you'll see 3 appendices going to be part of the public draft, one of them being the CVFPB background discussion, which takes a lot of that content that was previously housed in chapter 1 in the 2017 plan, moves it to an appendix. So we have that place where folks new to CVFPB or needing a refresher can go and take a look at all those history pieces and of the SSIA and how the CVFPB came to fruition, and allows the update to dive right into the update discussion. Chapter 2 or Appendix 2 is I think we're calling it Appendix B actually, is the legislative reference and reader's guide, which is typical or traditional for this process, as well as the final Appendix C being the CVFPB recommendations, which takes the recommendations you'll see in Chapter 3, adds a little bit more detail to them and discussion to them. Next slide, please. The summary of the major comments that we've received so far in the working draft. One was to add detail regarding storm events and extreme events, including the 2019 storm event and how those have impacted SPFC facilities. To strengthen our discussion on agricultural sustainability, particularly in the policy recommendations discussion. Add equity as a societal value to emphasize the importance of addressing issues regarding equity and social justice surrounding flood and water management. To strengthen the discussion on the ties between the update and the governor's water resiliency portfolio. And then also key updates on project implementation activities for completed projects. Next slide, please. Additional major comments received include tribes more in the planning and implementation process. There's a lack of tribal representation in task forces, working groups, development of guidance and planning. There are tribes that want to be involved in not only just the commenting on plans, but in the planning and plan creation process. Tribal members can add different considerations and solutions into the process than other entities. And inclusion of tribes into the process could streamline project implementation down the road. Additionally, comments received on including the non-SPFC facilities in some of the recommendations, building out more of the outcomes, indicators, and metrics for the performance tracking across the societal values, strengthening the discussion on the lack of local funding and the ability to pay issues that exist, and expanding the CVFPB implementation discussion, which is one of the holes we knew we had in the document. We just hadn't gotten to there and needed the funding plan and other things to be in place. But it was nice to see those comments, and we were able to start addressing those coming into the public draft. Next slide, please. Some of the notable changes being made, adding some more information about some of the more recent extreme events that we've occurred, including the drought and those 2019 storm high water events. Adding equity and social justice not only as a fifth societal value, but adding it as a policy issue that needs to be addressed and have recommendations associated with it. We added a summary similar to 2017, a summary on our communications and engagement effort to highlight the work that's gone in and the teams that have worked so hard, not only at the DWR and board level, but across all of our engaged parties. We added crosswalks for the water resiliency portfolio goals. So we have a decent sized table in the document now that really focuses on how the CVFPB contributes to numerous of the water resiliency portfolio goals. We bolstered our agricultural sustainability discussion, not only in Chapter 2, where we have many areas talking about continuing conversations across some of the policy issues, but also in the recommendations piece. There are several places in which we've highlighted agricultural sustainability. Updates to completed project descriptions, updating the information based on new data and information from locals and other folks to bring those up to date. We added refinements from the Conservation Strategy Working Draft comments, and then additions on spotlights on the NFIP Risk Rating 2.0 and some other floodplain risk management topics. Next slide, please. Almost there. I'll get us to our break pretty soon. We also added tribal partnership in several of the policy recommendations, highlighting some of the issues I talked about a couple slides ago. We expanded the performance tracking, outcomes, indicators, and metrics. What you'll see in the public draft will be, at least for the previous four recognized societal values, you'll see a pretty significant draft list of outcomes, indicators, and metrics. And within the equity piece, you'll see at least the discussions of what some of those outcomes, indicators, and metrics may look like with text on how we need to move forward to begin addressing those. Clarifying the phasing terminology for respective years. So where in 2017, we had phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 in the funding. Now we're breaking it out into those years. So in successive planning cycles, it'll be a little bit easier to follow what those phases are referring to. And then we added spotlights on annual inspections, flood-mar, nature-based solutions, defining annual O&M and deferred maintenance, and then FEMA Risk Rating 2.0. Next slide, please. Some of the information and data that were filled in based on the gaps and things that we hadn't quite gotten to in the working draft. So we incorporated updated life loss and economic damages and updated climate change information from our technical work. We incorporated stakeholder feedback on impacts of COVID-19 and how it's affected the planning and implementation of our systems. We expanded the climate change adaptation content and the summary of the analysis. The adaptation content comes not only from our CVFPB effort, but also working with the conservation strategy adaptation work. We expanded content on the concluding sections in Chapter 4. A lot of that, next steps type information in Chapter 4. We anticipate some of that information will be pulled up and used in the action plan that we're going to be putting together, the Chapter 2, or not Chapter 2, at the beginning of the document. We're working with the board on that. And then we added the 6 regional spotlights in the middle of the document. Next slide, please. So the last slide on information and data being filled is more of the funding side. So how do we address our funding plan in our implementation section? So we incorporated our updated historical expenditures and commitments by DWR flood management programs, and we updated that through 2021 dollars or through 2021 information. We incorporated our CVFPB funding plan instead, including developing those local historical or state, federal, local historical expenditures. Updated our ongoing and capital cost figures. We've have a discussion on federal, state, and local cost shares, and then the results of our financial model. Next slide, please. So I'll go to the next slide, please. So where we are going, as mentioned, we've been working really hard to get a draft prepared. It is currently with our DWR and Central Valley Flood Protection Board executives for their review. We were planning on coming back in March 25th, the March board date, to provide another briefing on the progress of the plan itself. And then shortly thereafter, planning on releasing the documentation. We do have ongoing tribal consultations and follow-ups with those county officials that I mentioned earlier, as well as we are looking for ways to continue to more thoroughly engage the Corps, possibly looking at folks at the division office and those sort of things. One note at the bottom is that the public draft will be fully formatted in an ADA accessible fashion, so that when it's posted up on the website, it meets all those standards and allows for more full access to the document by folks. We will provide a similar content or comment tool, to the working draft that we did, to the public draft that we did with the working draft, which was a very successful tool for us. Next slide, please. And this slide is our typical timeline slide that we've brought before. And so what this highlights is that we do have the public draft getting slated to come out here in the next little bit. And then one item of note is that the flood system status report and state plan of flood control descriptive document public drafts should be coming out hopefully by the end of the day today, but if not, early next week. And I believe we're looking at a 60-day review on those. So it's exciting that those documents are prepared and coming out, and those documents have helped inform the public draft of the CVFPP. So it's very nice to see that. And then the conservation strategy public draft, as I highlighted earlier, was released in December. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see all those drafts, the final drafts coming out in that fall timeframe. The last row, which we added to this line, highlights the the Central Valley Flood Protection Board public process that will be entering upon release of the public draft. And I'd like to hand it over to Ruth Darling to finish those last slide or so.
Great, thank you, Jason. Good morning, President Edgar and members of the board. Ruth Darling with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and I'm going to just go over the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan public hearing and review process. So you'll notice on that last row, when the 2022 update is released for public review, there'll be a 60-day comment period. And during that time, the board will hold public hearings. And after that, we will get into scheduling public workshops to workshop comments received on the public draft. Ryan, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just as a reminder, the Central Valley Flood Protection Act of 2008 states that DWR shall prepare the flood plan and the board shall adopt the flood plan. In addition, it also states that the flood board will hold at least 2 hearings to receive comments on the proposed plan. At least one of those hearings shall be in the Sacramento Valley and one shall be in the San Joaquin Valley. So the board shall also accept comments in writing with regard to the proposed plan, and the board may make changes to the proposed plan to resolve issues raised in the hearings or respond to comments received by the board. So for now, we have scheduled, we're planning on scheduling 1 in-person hearing in the Sacramento region and 1 in-person hearing for the San Joaquin region. And we will also be holding a virtual public hearing. We're working with DWR and consultants right now to determine if we have the ability to make those in-person meetings a hybrid meeting. So folks would be able to tune in and watch and engage if they can't actually come to the venue. So that will be determined within the next couple weeks. We would like to give folks about 3 weeks once the public draft is released to schedule these public hearings, so they have time to dive into the document and review it. We will also be posting the schedule for these public hearings on our website, as well as the venue and then the link to the virtual hearing. And then with the release of the public draft, as Jason indicated, there will be instructions on how to comment. This will also be posted on our website, but we will be receiving virtual comments through the public hearing process as well as the workshops. So all of this information, again, will be posted. We'll keep our interested parties informed on the public hearing and review process, as well as scheduled workshops likely within the June and July and potentially August timeframes. And with that, next slide, please. Are there any questions? I'll hand it back to President Dolan.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good information. We either have or are going to receive that PowerPoint so we can spend a little more time absorbing it. So appreciate that. I see no hands raised.
Nothing in the chat.
And nothing in the chat. So the outreach efforts on this have been extensive and comprehensive. So, okay, I'm seeing some waving going on. Is that you, Mr. Johnson? Are you waving or were you adjusting your video?
I was adjusting my video.
All right, always happy to hear from you.
Since my mute is off, I want to say thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Yes, wow. Okay, I don't see any comments, so y'all can get back to meet that tight deadline.
Thank you.
One or more of you to a few more meetings, so the outreaches are great. Any closing comments, Mr. Rother?
No, thank you for the time, and thank you and other board members and staff for participating in all of the public outreach meetings we've had.
I think that collaboration through this process has been very good and will continue, and it will be a more meaningful plan that we can continue to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So, you know, Mr. Seidler, you can do 10 minutes. I know you can because I saw that. But we're happy to give you more time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take 10 minutes. Come back in 10 minutes. I don't think we're, she said, I have the jitters.
5:30.
11:28.
Oh, feels like 5:30.
President Dolan, just so you know, you're on live mic.
Thank you for reminding me. There's no way I can mute myself, huh?
I can do it from up there if you want.
No, I'm kidding. We'll keep it open, or you'll have to jump up and down. We're getting ready to reconvene. You said? And it looks to me like Ryan Jones has reopened and opened up all the login invites. So the board reconvened. Thank you for allowing us that break. I went outside and ran around the block. Not. All right. We are at item 10. I'm just trying to get rid of my jitters. We are at the section of board items. So item 10A is adoption of resolution for California Code of Regulation, Title 23, Division something, Chapter 1, Articles 2 and 8, rulemaking. Something we have been working on for quite a while, particularly our board counsel, Chief Dua, who I will ask to introduce and explain this item. Mr. Dua.
Thank you, and good morning, President Dolan, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeet Dua, and I am the board's counsel. Today, I am pleased to present for the board's consideration approval and adoption of board resolution number 2022-01, which adopts the CEQA finding that the proposed action is exempt from CEQA and authorizes the board's executive officer or myself to submit to the Office of Administrative Law the final rulemaking package for additions and deletions to the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Division 1, Chapter 1, Articles 2 and 8. Article 8 of the board's regulations set forth the technical standards for the construction of flood control facilities within the board's jurisdiction and any encroachments thereto. It also contains technical drawings and figures, which have also been updated in this effort. Specifically, the proposed rulemaking amends sections 111 through 138, figures 8.01 through 8.11, and codifies a new section 139, which covers in-ground pools. Finally, the proposed rulemaking also revises the definitions set forth in Article 2, Section 4, associated with the revisions made in Article 8. The proposed rulemaking was published in the California Regulatory Notice Register on November 27th, 2020, which commenced the 45-day public review period. And despite the outreach and collaborative approach we took formulating the proposed regulations, board staff did receive comments to the proposed regulations from the Central Valley Flood Control Association, and then later from the department, which both resulted in the reposting of the proposed regulations as revised on several occasions for a total of 3 additional 15-day public comment periods. The last public comment period ended on February 17th, 2022, without any written comments received. And unless there are any compelling comments received during today's hearing, board staff does not recommend that any further substantive revisions be made to the proposed regulations prior to submitting the final rulemaking package to the OAL. This final rulemaking package is the result of many hours of meetings, coordination, and cooperation between board staff, its consultants, the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Water Resources, staff, and our local flood control partners. The effort to finalize and bring the proposed rulemaking to the board was a concerted one that had more participants than I can probably name. I would be remiss, however, to not publicly share my gratitude for their input and support in bringing this effort to fruition. Board staff Gary Lemon and Dan Fua, who are both now retired, were instrumental in getting the initial draft of proposed regulations in order. And Eagle Lang, Michael Wright, Steve Lamb, Andrea Buckley, Preston Shotbell, and Angelis Calizo picked up where Gary and Dan left off. The board's consultants comprised of Betty Andrews, Rod Mayer, and Renato Espinosa. Mark List, Michael Sabagian, Eric McGrath from DWR, Brian Larson and his staff with the Corps, and representatives and members of the Central Valley Flood Control Association, namely Megan Nagy, Rick Reinhardt, Scott Shapiro. They all played an integral role in bringing this together. And thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to work on this important project. And forgive me if I've inadvertently left anybody out. This concludes my remarks, and I request that the board approve and adopt Resolution 2022-01, which adopts the CEQA finding that the proposed action is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15309, 15321, and 15325, and authorizes the executive officer or myself as board counsel to take the necessary actions to finalize the rulemaking documents for submittal to the OAL for review and publication. I'd like to turn this back now to the board, and I'm available with Rod or Renato to take any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you. You're allowed a big sigh of relief. Or maybe save it to see if we actually take action today. I'm going to look to see if board members have questions, comments, or input. And I think I see Mr. Ramirez, Board Member Ramirez, hand up.
Thank you, President Dolan. You do. I just wanted to echo what Jeet said and also recognize Jeet for his good work. This takes a village, a large village. It's crowded and it's complicated and it's important. It drives a lot of our work, and I think the participation reflects that. So thanks to everybody who's helped. It's been a long road, and Jeet and his team have got us to where we are, which I think we're all grateful for. So thank you.
Well said. You may see a lot of nodding heads with that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, that's the board. Any other board? Any members on our participant list?
Rick Reinhardt.
Mr. Reinhardt, good morning. Is it still morning?
Morning, President Dolan. And first, let me congratulate you on behalf of the Flood Control Association for your recent appointment and member of Alliance for his reappointment. I want to thank board staff for working closely with the association. I know it was a difficult process. I think there's some lessons learned from that. We look forward to improving that process as we look at future updates to Title 23. And so while we didn't get all of the changes we were looking for, we were very satisfied with the final product with one exception. And that's what I really want to talk about, just to go on record today, that the final change that was made was exempting DWR from having to get permission from the board to do their maintenance. And this is something that our members had also advocated for, that through agreement, they're required to do these things. And they don't believe that they should have to get your permission to do something they're required to do. And it frustrates them that exception was granted to DWR, who is an LMA just like them. So while very happy with the process, just want on this one point to express our frustration that the state made a distinction between DWR as an LMA and the reclamation districts as an LMA. Thank you for your time and opportunity to comment today.
Thank you. We understand your comment and your concern. I don't think it will necessarily be ignored. Mr. Tom Slater, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Chair Dolan. I echo Rick's comments. I'm one of those members. I'm currently the president of Reclamation District 999.
Okay.
And I see my camera's not on, if that's important. But we obviously are a public agency, and we've accepted the responsibility for operating and maintaining these levees that surround our district. We've signed an OM, R&R. We've increased our budget by updating our assessment. We've submitted an LOI. We are in the process of working on a SWIFT document. And the point I want to make is that we're doing all the things we're supposed to do, and so are all the districts up and down the valley. So as much as we agree, bless you, agree with the process and all the hard work you've done, we don't discount that. We are frustrated, as Rick pointed out, that DWR has that exemption and the LMAs do not. And so I just want to make clear that we wish for a different outcome there. And we look forward to continuing working with you on all this. But that's our beef, if you will. We wish we could have joined DWR in that exemption. So thank you, Chair Dolan.
Thank you for your comments. We will have a conversation on that. Unless the board votes no. It won't. Okay. Regulations are challenging to do, and all of ours are so comprehensive. We're taking them as we can accomplish. I do not see any other hands raised. Let me make another call. This is open for public comment at this point.
President Dolan, if there are no other public comments or questions or comments from the board, I would just like to respond briefly to both Mr. Reinhardt's and Mr. Slater's comments.
Hey, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you. And certainly appreciate those comments. I would just like to point out that the final product is much of it towards the end, and the delay in getting it to the board was through collaboration with the inspection compliance work group in formulating some language that specifies the OMR&R requirements and explicitly sets forth the types of activities, the normal maintaining activities that does not require notice to the board. And those types of activities that may be questionable and require a check-in, it provides a truncated 15-day business day review process for the board to turn around and give feedback to the RD who's notified the board. And if they don't receive a response in 15 days, they can go forward with their project or their work or that activity with the assumption that it's normal maintenance activities. So I understand their concern, but we do think the resulting regulations are a vast improvement and will really help expedite their work out there when they're performing their maintenance. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We, the board appreciates our local partners. If you don't know that, I'm going to say that many times. And the cooperation and partnership is important. Okay, I see no other comments. One last call to the public participants. One last call to, do you see one? Nothing in the chat. Nothing. One last call to board members. Is there a motion? The recommendation is to approve the resolution with the findings.
I'll move to approve.
Board Member Ramirez, is there a second?
I'll second.
Countryman, second by Countryman. Ready to have the roll. Mr. Jones, call the roll.
Board Member Grego?
Yes.
Board Member Johnson?
Aye.
Board Member Ramirez?
Aye.
Board Member Valines?
Aye.
Board Member Countryman?
Yes.
President Dolan?
Yes. The motion is approved. 6 yes, no no's, 1 vacancy. Thank you. Just a bit anticlimactic, but nice job. Thank you, Mr. Dua. Thank you to everyone who ardently helped us to make it as good as it could be at this stage.
Good job. I hope Emma finds out that we finally did it.
Yeah, somebody's got to send an email.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a sprint and it became a marathon, but that's sometimes the way it goes. All right, we will move on to item 10B, which is a hearing on a permit number 19486. Yes, this is an action item. Reclamation District 817, Bear River Setback Levy Project. Mr. Mike Zalazzo is going to, board staff is going to introduce this.
Great. Thank you very much, President Dolan, and good morning. Good morning to the members of the board. My name is Mike Salazzo. I am a senior engineer with the board's Plan Implementation and Compliance branch. I will be presenting resolution number 2022-03 to approve the Bear River setback levy project proposed by Reclamation District 817, and we will also approve a variance to board standards proposed by the applicant. Next slide. Today's presentation will begin with an overview of the request, followed by figures showing the project location, a discussion of the background and project description, and finally, board staff's analysis and recommendation. Next slide. This is an overview. The board staff is requesting that the board adopt resolution number 2022-03, which consists of 3 actions. First, it would adopt the CEQA findings as a responsible agency that the project will not have a significant effect on flood risk. Second, it would approve a variance to the minimum inspection trench bottom width of 12 feet required under board standards contained in Title 23. And finally, it would approve the draft permit number 19486 that includes the Army Corps of Engineers letter of permission to allow RD 817 to construct the project. The main features of the project are a 2,800 foot setback levee at a maximum distance of about 300 feet north of the existing levee. The setback levee would include a shallow cutoff wall of about 30 feet deep, a seepage berm that would connect the upstream setback levee to the existing levee at the downstream end, and a 7,500 foot landside levee buttress to improve stability of the downstream levee. The project is located on the north bank of the Bear River, near the city of Wheatland, about 2 miles southwest of Wheatland in Sutter County. Finally, the project would address the existing erosion and seepage issues, as well as improve the levee geometry regarding side slopes and crown width. Next slide. So the next few slides will show the location of the project. This one shows the general vicinity of it, with the roughly 2 mile project area shown by the blue curved line southwest of Wheatland, between highways 65 and 70, about midway between Yuba City and the Roseville area. Next slide. Shown here is the general project location. If I could direct your attention to the rectangular box with the red hatching in the center of the figure, this is the site of the setback levee in the downstream buttress. The site is in Sutter County, south of Wheatland Road, east of Pleasant Grove Road, and protects the area within RD 817's boundaries, indicated by the orange dashed area between Bear River and Dry Creek. The project will also use a borrow site that is located on the northern limits of the city of Wheatland, but the focus of this presentation will be on the project site, which is shown in detail in the next figure. Next slide. Okay, so here is the project site, which consists mainly of 3 features shown in the large double dashed box. So if we start on the left side or the downstream end, the land side levee buttress is shown by the line that extends from Pleasant Grove Road about 1.5 miles to the east to the location where the hexagon is, and that indicates the seepage berm. From the seepage berm, the setback levee will be constructed north of the existing levee for about 2,800 feet, and then reconnect with the existing levee at the upstream end. The seepage berm itself will be constructed at the downstream connection with the existing levee to control end-around effects, since the existing levee that does not contain a cutoff wall at that location. But on the upstream side, on the rightmost extent of the project, the upstream extent of the project, a cutoff wall exists, so no end-around effects are expected. Also noted on this figure is the channel constriction and erosion site identified by DWR, and you can kind of see it in the bend in the Bear River near the upstream end of the project. Next slide. So to put the project in perspective, I'd like to give a brief background and permitting timeline before discussing the details of the project features. The original Bear River North Levee was constructed around 1941 and experienced severe erosion events in its lifetime that led to reconstruction and bank stabilization activities. In July 2013, the California Department of Water Resources, or DWR, completed a pre-feasibility study for the area and identified a critical erosion site, which was shown on the previous figure, that led to a partnership with RD 817 to plan and construct the setback levee that is being funded by Proposition 1E funds at a 90% state, 10% local cost share. And then finally, construction and closeout is expected to be completed this year. Next slide. Some of the key events in the board's permitting process are shown here, starting with RD 817 submitting an application with the board in February of 2020, and the board issuing a statement of no objection to the Army Corps of Engineers in April of 2020 to initiate the federal review under the Army Corps Section 408 Project Alteration Program. RD 817 then approved the initial study mitigated negative declaration and monitoring plan in May of 2021. The Corps found the project to be complete in September. Board staff and RD 817 gave an informational briefing on the project in November, so some of this may be not new news. The Corps completed the federal environmental review by issuing the finding of no significant impact, also in November. And then in December, RD 817 provided final plans and requested a variance to the board standards, which requires board approval. Then in January of this year, the Army Corps issued its letter of permission, allowing for the construction of the project, which includes the proposed design that is subject to the variance request. Next slide. I will just give a brief overview of the project features. First, we'll start off with the typical cross-section of the setback levee. You may be able to see from this from the cross-section below that slopes are 3-to-1 with the drainage way from the toes, 20-foot crown width. Cutoff wall is shown right in the middle to a depth of about 30 feet below the top of the working platform. And then encircled is sort of where the inspection trench will be located. That'll be discussed later. Next slide. This is a cross section of the seepage berm, extending 50 feet away from the toe of the levee, 30 feet along the levee. It's a drainage blanket sloping away from the toe, and the purpose of the berm is to protect against seepage and underground effects when connecting with the existing levee. Next slide. This is the cross-section of the downstream landside levee buttress. It extends, some of the features of it include, it extends the crown of the existing levee by 8 feet, runs for 7,500 feet, the slope of 2.5 to 1, and goes all the way down to Pleasant Grove Road. So that the new slope flattens the embankment, and with that extra material provides additional levee stability downstream of the project. Next slide. So now will be staff's analysis of the project. The staff reviewed project documents. I'd like to point out a few of our findings. First, the project, under the hydraulic analysis, the project exceeds the 1957 Sacramento River Flood Control project profile, as well as the 100-year event profile used in the design of the project. That design water surface elevation includes effects on water surface elevations due to wave effects. The effect on the design water surface elevation is localized near the upstream connection of the setback levee, resulting in a decrease of 2/100ths of a foot, then an increase of 4/100ths of a foot, 300 feet downstream. So those are minor. The project also includes revegetation on the waterside embankment for erosion control. Next, the project levee was analyzed for seepage and other effects and was designed to meet all design requirements. The project includes a higher percentage of fines than is required by board standards, and also includes cambered levee connections upstream and downstream to allow for settlement of the setback levee while retaining the top of levee design requirements. Next slide. Okay, so here, as part of the review of the project, staff evaluated RD 817's request for variance to the required levee inspection trench minimum bottom width of 12 feet. Section 11 of Title 23 Waters Division 1 requires that the applicant explain why compliance is infeasible or not appropriate. RD 817 stated in its application that the proposed 8-foot width would match typical equipment used in trench excavation work, and requiring 12 feet would require more construction time and resources. In addition to being more efficient to construct, RD 817 states that excavation of the foundation and construction of the fully penetrating cutoff wall that ties into the underlying clay layer would identify any subsurface conditions that could impair the stability of the levee. That would cut off also any kind of pathways that would be identified by the inspection trench as well. So for these reasons, RD 817 argues that the 12-foot requirement is not appropriate for the project. The Army Corps reviewed the proposed design and does not object to the bottom width, and board staff supports the approval of the variance requests here. So next slide. Regarding the California Environmental Quality Act, RD 817 filed a notice of determination with the counties of Yuba and Sutter counties on the initial study mitigated negative declaration and has incorporated those measures into the project. Approving the permit does not require additional findings to the board, acting as a responsible agency under CEQA, since the project does not result in significant effects of flood risk. Next and final slide. So staff recommends to the board that the board adopt resolution number 2022-03, given the reasons that were discussed today, and to direct the executive officer to take the necessary actions to execute the permit and comply with CEQA. That concludes the presentation. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that very clear and comprehensive presentation. We read all this, but it certainly helps for you to explain it. Mr. Ramirez, you get to start today for the most hand-ups, so you get to go first.
I'm not trying to set a record.
Okay,
you mentioned this during the presentation, but can you just cover the funding again, the total, and then the breakout and requirements?
Sure. If we can go back to the slide with the background. Here we go. Slide numbers. Oops.
Maybe not.
I think we've done there the background slide. I think it's number 6. There you go.
There it is.
There you go. So the project is being funded by Proposition 1E funds. Total project costs are about $11 million. And it's going to be a 90% state cost share and 10% local cost share. Those funds are expected to sunset later this year, so construction of the project should be completed in order to for RDA 17 and DWR to close out the project and share the costs of it.
Great, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
That answers your question? Okay, good. I see Mr. Countryman and then Mr. Gooley. Member Countryman.
Thank you. Just a real quick question. The existing levee, is it going to be borrowed to construct the new levee?
Right, there's going to be some degrade of the existing levee, and that material will be used in combination with other materials from the borrow site to construct a new levee and also to build the levee buttress downstream.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other board members? All right, then I'll proceed to participant hand raised, Mr. Gooley.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dolan, and yeah, nice presentation. I saw that cross section of the setback levee, and that caught my attention because we do habitat setback levies in the Delta. We do it for funding reasons to make our proposals more attractive. So when we build the setback levee like that, we leave the levee on the water side and sometimes make it a flatter slope and then plant trees in the levee. And I realize there's so many regulations with project levies, probably not possible. But if I could share my screen, Ms. Dolan, I'd like to, if I could, I'd show you one of my setback levies. We do them quite often. We've been successful in getting funding for them. I understand it's different with Delta. We're all tidal, and with high flows, trees may cause problems for debris downstream and whatnot. But I'm from Vermont and I love trees, so I don't know, maybe if you could consider planting some trees on the water side. As Mr. O'Regan stated later, mitigation is so expensive. The trees that we plant provide shaded riparian aquatic habitat, which is very valuable. It's good for the fish and whatnot. And I know Gil Cozio's done some planting of trees as well. Our problem in the Delta is we have to fight all the old farmers who have lived by the adage they can't have any trees on the levee, but the younger guys seem to understand that when you have a double wide levee, it gives you a couple strikes before the water hits your main levee, so a couple trees aren't really going to hurt anything. Would you like to see a picture of Google Earth of one of my setback levees?
We don't have that mechanism for you to do that now. I can speak for myself, and I think most board members, we have seen setback levy projects. If you want to send that to us, we'll look at it. At this point of the approval, with all the previous analysis and approvals of the Corps, CEQA findings, the FONSI findings, and all of the design reviews by every engineer possible. Making amendments at this point would not be appropriate.
Okay, well, thank you.
But we do like setbacks. You need to go up and see Hamilton City if you want to see the mother of them all.
Okay, Hamilton City?
Hamilton City, Glenn County,
Okay, I'll look at it.
10 miles off I-5.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments from our audience? Hand down, Mr. Gooley. I see none, so are we ready to close the hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
To close the hearing or
Would be
the
much-
discussion.
Yeah.
And to approve permit number 19486 for Reclamation District 817 on the Bear River Setback Levy project.
All right, thank you. The motion has been made to adopt the resolution and approve the permit. A second?
Second. Oh,
No, we're going to let Mr. Handraise have that one.
Whoever has the faster internet connection.
Yes, we all have that issue. You can get the
Well, it's
next
like
one.
Wall Street traders here at the flood board today.
Okay, motion by Griego, second by Ramirez. Mr. Jones, would you call the roll?
Board Member Griego,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Aye.
Board Member Ramirez,
aye.
Board Member Valines,
Aye.
Board Member Countryman,
Yes.
President Dolan.
Yes. Nice work, all. Our congratulations to RD 817, to DWR for the help and the money. Okay, we are going to proceed to item 10C. Is that right, Leslie? Yes. Okay. This item is to approve project partnership agreements and local partnership agreements, American River Watershed Common Features, Natomas Basin, and American River Common Features. Selva Samohan is going to introduce this. Selva Samohan, Mr. Mohan, you there?
Good afternoon, President Dolan. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can.
Thank you. So good afternoon, President Dolan, members of the board. My name is Selva Mohan, Chief of the Sacramento Levy Section Board Staff. Today I'm here to introduce the topic of amendments to the project partnership agreements and local project partnership agreements. Normally we refer them as PPA, LPPA amendments of the American River Watershed Natomas Basin Project and American River Common Features ARCF 2016 project to allow transfer of excess credits of about 101 million from the Natomas Basin project to the ARCF 16 project. Kyle Bickler, project manager from the Flood Projects branch, DWR, is here with me to provide details related to the proposed amendments. As you can recall, we provided an informational briefing to the board in the November board meeting on these proposed amendments, and this time it is an action item before the board. Next slide, Ryan. Thank you. So this slide summarizes today's presentation. The proposed action is about amending PPA and LPPA for two Army Corps projects concurrently to allow transfer of excess credits from one project to another. The image on the left side shows the two major levee improvement projects that are currently underway in the Sacramento region. The yellow one indicates the Natomas Basin project footprint, and the dark blue one show the ARCF 2016 projects elements. So these proposed amendments will allow transfer of excess credits from Natomas Basin project to ARCF 16 project. Now Kyle will go over the details of the proposed amendments, authorities, and timeline. And at the end of the presentation, I will come back and complete this presentation by requesting the board for approval of the proposed amendments. Kyle, take it away.
Thank you, Selva. Good afternoon, President Dolan and members of the board. I'm Kyle Bickler with the Department of Water Resources Flood Projects Branch I'm here to present item 10C to amend 4 agreements to transfer excess credit from the American River Watershed Project, Natomas Basin, to the American River Common Features Project, ARCF 2016. Recall we were here at the November 2021 board meeting a few months ago for a briefing to transfer excess credit. Next slide, please. One more.
We went back.
Here's an overview of the presentation. We'll show the parties involved in the current project partnership agreements, also called PPAs, and the local project partnership agreements called LPPAs, for both the Natomas Basin and the ARCF 2016 projects. We will summarize the process to transfer up to $101,564,000 in credit from Natomas Basin to ARCF 2016. Next, we'll look at summary tables showing the previous board resolutions and contract dates for the project partnership agreements to be amended, followed by the timeline to complete the amendments and the requested board action. Next slide. This slide shows the contract relationship between the Army Corps, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. Both projects have a 3-party project partnership agreement between the Corps, the board, and SAFCA, and both projects have a local project partnership agreement between the board and SAFCA. Both sets of project agreements require amendments for a total of 4 amendments to transfer credit. Next slide. This slide summarizes the process to transfer excess credit. Section 1166 of the Water Infrastructure for the Nation Act of 2016, called the WIN Act, basically allows for excess credit to be transferred from one project to another. The excess credit is credit in excess of the required non-federal cost share for a project and is applied towards the required non-federal cost share for a different water resources development project. The locally led Natomas Basin Levee Improvement Project was completed by SAFCA and DWR in 2012. The cost of improvements that exceeded the non-federal cost share in the Corps' authorized project are considered excess credit. In 2019, a comprehensive plan was submitted to the Corps to transfer excess credit from Natomas Basin to ARCF 2016. And in April 2020, the comprehensive plan was approved by the Assistant Secretary of the Army, called the ASA. And most recently, on February 11th, the PPA amendments were approved by the ASA and are ready to be signed by SAFCA, the board, and the Corps. By utilizing the WIN Act, the state and SAFCA's financial strategy will leverage the Natomas Basin credit to help pay the non-federal share of the $1.8 billion ARCF 2016 project. Next slide. Table 1 shows the Natomas Basin project PPA and LPPA agreements were signed by the board in August of 2016 with Resolution 2016-13, and the ARCF 2016 project PPA and LPPA were signed by the board in January of 2019 with Resolution 2019-03. The column on the right shows up to $101,564,000 in excess credit to be transferred to ARCF 2016. Table 2 is shown to help understand the process to amend the agreements. The local agency, SAFCA, generally signs first, followed by the board, and then the Corps of Engineers. For reference, the percent cost share is shown as identified in the PPAs and the LPPAs for each project. The federal government pays 65% of the project, and the non-federal partners split the remaining 35% at 30% local share and 70% state share, which equates to 10.5% for SAFCA and 24.5% for the state of California. The excess credit transferred to ARCF 2016 will be shared between the non-federal partners based on the typical 70% state and 30% local split. However, the actual percentage split will be based on the final accounting of SAFCA's and the state's expenditures for the Natomas Basin project. Next slide, please. This slide shows the timeline to transfer credit. As previously stated, DWR, on behalf of the board and in coordination with SAFCA, submitted the comprehensive plan for credit transfer to the Corps in 2019, and the Assistant Secretary of the Army approved the plan in April 2020. The PPA amendments were approved by the ASA earlier this month, and the amendments are now ready for signatures. The credit being transferred to ARCF 2016 will be applied towards the state's upcoming cost share payment that is due next month for construction of the Sacramento Weir widening project. This slide concludes my portion of the presentation, so I'll now pass it back to Selva. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Now I complete the presentation by going over the staff recommendation in this slide. Board staff recommends to adopt resolution 2022-04 in substantially the form provided in attachment A. Approve amendment number 1 to the PPA for the Natomas Basin project and amendment number 1 to the PPA for the ARCF 2016 project in substantially the form provided in attachment B. Approve amendment number 1 to the LPPA for the Natomas Basin project and amendment number 1 to the LPPA for the ARCF 2016 project in substantially the form provided in attachment C. And delegate the board president to sign the amendments to PPA and LPPAs for the Natomas Basin project and ARCF 2016 project. So this concludes this presentation, and Kyle and I are available here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Next slide. Yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And Selva, thank you for speaking all of that, because I'm going to say, as he said, these are 4 agreements, and it's a donor receiver, and it's complex, and the work to accomplish this is recognized. Do any board members have any comments or questions regarding this item? It is an action item. I see none. Anyone of our participants want to offer a comment or ask a question? Floor is open. Floor is closed. Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
I move to adopt the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Moved by member Countryman, seconded by member Griego. Mr. Jones, call the roll, please.
Board Member Griego?
Yes.
Board Member Johnson?
Aye.
Board Member Ramirez?
Aye.
Board Member Valines?
Aye.
Board Member Countryman?
Yes.
President Dolan?
Yes, that action is approved. 6 yes, no no's, 1 vacancy. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We don't have to break now, do we? No, you don't want to. Okay, I'll put that as an ask Leslie that now. Okay, and we'll proceed with the agenda. Item 10D. Do you say Trilla or Trillia?
I say Trilla.
Trilla? I'm going to say Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority.
That's what I call it.
Briefing. This is an informational item. They're going to provide a briefing on their actions to achieve 500-year level of events. So is Darren Soon? There you are. I know you had an appointment, so there you are. Mr. Soon, you're going to introduce us.
Perfect timing. Thank you, President Dolan. Good afternoon, members of the board. Darren Soon again, back at you. This next item, I think, is a good precursor to our tour in April. And as you know, the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority has been working to meet 200-year level of protection for the Reclamation District 784 levee system for some time now. The Yuba Water Agency is also working on a new Bullards atmospheric river control spillway, and together with some additional levee improvements to the RD 784 urban levee system, that improved flood system together should be able to pass a 500-year level event. So that's pretty exciting. The draft EIR for this 500-year project is out for public comment right now and until March 4th. And you may recall our dear Executive Director, Paul Bruner, retired at the end of last year. And so today, Rick Reinhardt with MBK Engineers is here to present an overview of the project. And we welcome any comments that any of the board members or the public might have during this public comment period on the draft EIR. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick Reinhardt of MBK Engineers. Take it away, Rick.
Aaron, that was a nice introduction. President Dolan, members of the board, really excited to be here today. I want to start with the point Darren made that, as the board's well aware, we have had a turnover in leadership with Paul's retirement. Paul's role's actually been split up into two primary different roles. The new executive director is Kevin Mallon. Kevin is the CAO for Yuba County. And then water agency staff has entered into agreement with Three Rivers to provide staffing support. And I've got Kyle Morgado here today that I want to introduce. Kyle will be your agency point of contact in handling all the day-to-day activities of Three Rivers. And he's supported by Ryan McNally. Kyle, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, I just want to say hello, and I turned my video on, but I don't know if anybody can see me. I really appreciate all the support, and working with Trillia has been fun for the last couple months, and it's a great opportunity to finish the help that we've provided for Yuba County and continue to grow in the future, potential other projects. So just nice to meet everybody, and look forward to seeing people in person, hopefully pretty soon.
Thanks, Kyle. So I'm going to walk through the presentation, and in addition to Kyle, I've got Ann King here with me from GEI, and we'll be available at the end to answer any questions. I want to start by, I think the board's well aware, we've completed all of the improvements to meet state urban levee design criteria 200-year standards, and we're in the process of going through that ULDC certification, and we're going to complete that in April and May. Really looking forward to that, and looking forward to talking with the board about the project in more detail on our April 8th site visit. So what we're going to talk about today is that, why don't you go to the next slide, please, is that we've, in thinking about where we go from here, or should we go anywhere from here? Should we just be done? We think we can actually, with a minor investment, with the improvements that are made that the water agency proposes at New Bullard's Bar, with the addition of the atmospheric river control spillway, we think we can actually get to 500 year for a small increment of additional investment. We've spent about $550 million to date to get to 200 year. And I'll talk more about this at the end of the briefing, but with the ARC spillway, we think we can get to 500 year for an order of magnitude less than that. So today's briefing, I'm going to provide some background on the project, purpose and objectives. I'm going to describe the features and then summarize. Really going to focus on the hydraulics section of the EIR. I think that's the area that the board is going to be most interested in, although we're prepared to talk about any of the impact areas. Next slide, please. So let me start by describing what we've done with the existing system. As this board is well aware, we started our improvements in 2005, and we've undergone changes in hydrology, new hydraulic models, constructed setback levees. And what that's resulted in is, while all of the levees meet 200 year, there's a huge variation in the performance of this levee system. On the Yuba River, for example, because of the stage reductions associated with the Feather River setback levee, the Yuba River below Simpson Lane actually is closer to 300 year than 200 year. But the benefits of that setback levee start to attenuate as you move upstream of Simpson Lane, and the upstream end, closer to the gold fields, just meets 200 year. The Feather River levee, under existing conditions, meets 370 year. That's because of the setback levee, along with the changes in hydrology. And then the same with the Bear River North levee. At the downstream end in the setback area, it's a very high level of protection, close to 370 year. But as we extend upstream and the influence of the feather diminishes, that we only have 200 year. And then all along the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal and the Olivehurst Detention Basin Ring levee, we have 200 year. And then if the ARC spillway is built, those performance numbers are going to increase even more. And so the increment to get to 500 year is relatively small. So I'm going to just quickly walk through some of the improvements that would be needed to the levee system. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about the objectives. So I talked about improving to a continuous level of protection of 500 year. We want to make sure that the system is resilient to climate change. Looking forward to seeing DWR's release of the new climate change hydrology and understanding how the system will change. But we know the hydrology is going to change, and we want to be prepared for that and not responsive to it after a flood event like we have in the past. And then we also can't do this alone, and we're going to need to develop a project that meets both state and federal flood risk reduction funding requirements so that we can receive grant funds as we have in the past to implement these improvements. Now, for the EIR purposes, we had to put a date in there when we plan on doing construction. And so we've put in there December 31st of 2027 as a goal. But of course, that's going to be dependent on many factors, primarily getting the ARC spillway construction funding and getting that project implemented. And then the funding for this would pursue along in parallel with the ARC spillway. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about the specific improvements. On the Yuba River, and I'll show this graphically, our biggest problem on the Yuba is water coming through the gold fields actually overtops the western edge of the gold fields. And so we need to raise that embankment, that western edge of the gold fields, for about 4,900 feet to prevent that overtopping. Most of the work on the Yuba River is slight levee raising. That the underseepage remediation that we've already built is sufficient in all locations but one, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the raise that we're talking about is, you can see, it's anywhere from 0.3 of a foot to 1.5 feet. We do have a slurry wall constructed by the Corps of Engineers just upstream of Simpson Lane. We're pursuing some confirmatory borings just to make sure that that wall was tied in and will function at a higher stage we're looking at. Let's go to plan view. So on the Yuba River is just off the slide at the top. North is up. The Yuba River is running from right to left. On the right side is the gold fields and the embankment raise. And then along the center is the alignment of the Yuba River, and that's the reach of the Yuba River levee that's proposed to be increased. One point I should have made earlier about the ARC spillway is while the project is defined and the water agency knows the spillway improvements they want to build, there is uncertainty over what the FIRO operation will be. The flood-informed reservoir operation will be for Bullards Bar and Orville once that spillway is built and the water control manual update is completed. And there's differing opinions about how those reservoirs ought to be operated. As part of the comprehensive needs assessment, it was proposed that water supply be the dominant benefit of that water control operation. That results in a lower benefit to flood control, lower stage reduction. On the other end of the spectrum is a flood control dominant FIRO operation, which results in increased stage reduction. So for purposes of the EIR and for the project that I'm describing today, we've assumed the higher stage, the water supply dominant, not because we believe that that's the outcome, only that we want to be conservative and make sure the maximum scope of the project that could conceivably be implemented with FIRO is, and therefore triggering levee improvements, that we've defined that. Let's go to the next slide. On the Feather River, Bear, and WPIC, for the Feather and Bear River setback, if the flood control dominant FIRO operation is implemented, we don't have to do anything. It goes to 500 years strictly from resulting from the ARC spillway. But if we have this less conservative water supply dominant operation, we have to raise a portion of the Feather River about a half a foot downstream of Star Bend. And then the relief wells at the bottom of the system either need to be augmented or replaced with a slurry wall. On the Bear River, there's a portion where we've got either put in a seepage berm or a slurry wall. And then in the upper Bear River, there's some landside grading work, and we'd have to raise the levee by as much as 1.1 feet. The WPIC levee is where, that's the majority, the most costly work is required. And that would require up to a 1.9 foot raise. Why don't you go to the next slide, please? So the Feather River is at the top of the screen, north is to the right, at the bottom of the screen is the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal, and to the left of the screen is the Bear River, and you can see the Bear River setback levee kind of in the mid to top left. So in the top middle of the screen, you can see the short reach that has the Feather River levee raise, 1/2 foot. At the top left is where the relief wells would need to be augmented or replaced with a slurry wall. You can see the identified improvements on the Bear River, as well as the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal. Next slide, please. Why don't you go to the next slide? I want to talk about this in plan view. This is the more complex part of the project. What we're looking at is the upstream end of the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal. So the Interceptor Canal levee is running left to right at the top of the screen, and at the center of the screen is the Olivehurst Detention Basin and Ring Levee. And you can see the Olivehurst Detention Basin Ring Levee tying into Highway 70. Under existing conditions, the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal levee ends, takes a 90-degree turn, goes under Highway 70, and the Olivehurst Detention Basin Ring Levee and Pump Station Detention Basin function to complete the levee system. The exception, it ties into Highway 70 embankment, and we rely on Highway 70. And in fact, our ULDC finding relies on, I think it's about 1/2 mile of Highway 70 that we rely on to provide flood protection. But it's not a very high embankment. We've got 1 to 2 feet of water on it in the 200-year. It's paved. We think it's a very low risk factor, but it's not a flood control feature, and it's not O&M by a flood control agency. With a higher water surface, we looked at, is there another alternative to that? And so you see this levee in bold extending from the Olivehurst Detention Basin Ring Levee, going to the right, going to the north, up towards McGowan, and then heading east and tying into Highway 65. That's a new levee that would be constructed as part of this particular alternative in lieu of relying on Highway 70 as flood protection. It would be a very expensive piece, probably as much or more than the rest of the project features combined. Next slide, please. If funding was available and if the ARC spillway moved forward, we could be in construction as soon as 2024 and completed by 2027, although I think that's unlikely given the difficulty of securing funding so far for the ARC spillway. We think the work could be completed in one construction season, but may occur in different years depending on how implementation is proposed. Why don't you go to the next slide, please? I don't want to go into much detail here, but we're happy to answer questions on this. The EIR evaluates all of the impact areas, but because of the board's jurisdiction, I thought in particular you would be interested in how the project affects the surrounding jurisdictions through changes in water surface elevation. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we did a hydraulic impact analysis. These show all of the index locations where we measured changes in stage. Next slide, please. We did 3 separate hydraulic impact analysis, which normally you do 2 for an EIR. We looked at the project-specific effects. We looked at the cumulative impacts with other known projects. But then because of comments we received during the scoping period, we also went back and looked at how has the surrounding jurisdictions been impacted by the Three Rivers project to date, meaning comparing pre-2005 to what's on the ground today. For the project-specific impacts, the first category for the EIR, for the Yuba River North Levee, because we're raising the Goldfields Western Embankment and pushing more water in the Yuba River, there are some increases in the community of Hallwood. 0.03 of a foot for the 100-year and 0.2 of a foot in the 500-year. On the Feather River, there's 1/100 of a foot increase at Yuba City and Boyd's Landing for the 200-year. For the Bear River, there's a 1/100 foot increase at the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal in the 200-year and at Dry Creek, and same impact for the 100 and 500-year. For the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal, there's 0.03 of a foot impact in the 100-year and 0.02 of a foot impact in the 500-year. And that impact is coming from not because of a lower less overtopping into the urban portion of the basin. It's because of the waterside fill associated with those levee raises. For the cumulative impact analysis, at 16 of the 19 index points, there is a reduction in flood stage. And at the other 3 index points, there was no change at those index points. Then lastly, for the pre-Trilla to today, the surrounding jurisdictions have all benefited as a result of construction of the project because of the setback levies. So the Yuba River at Simpson Lane has dropped 1.15 feet for the 200-year. For the Feather River at Yuba City, it's decreased 1.45 feet. The Bear River at the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal, and this is important, the next 2 points for the horseshoe discussion. The stage in the Bear River is 1.16 foot drop for the 200-year, and the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal at Best Slough is 1.15 feet lower in the 200-year. Next slide, please. We covered 3 alternatives in the, there were 3 alternatives we looked at, but we did not carry forward in the EIR. The first is there's a Yuba River levee that is a non-project levee that's in the floodway between the project levee and the river. We looked at improving that and extending it and raising it, but it was going to be too costly, and we would have to have an agency take over O&M of it. We looked at a road that runs perpendicular to flow in the Yuba River, D'Antonio Road. We looked at degrading it, but we found the benefit wasn't worth the cost and how it would impact transportation patterns during high water. And then lastly, we looked at a more expansive raise of embankments in the gold fields, but it had increased impacts without increased benefits. So we did not carry those forward. There are 2 alternatives now analyzed in the EIR. One is the proposed project without the WPIC West Levee extension, and the second is the proposed project without the Goldfields West Levee embankment raise. Next slide, please. As Darren said earlier, the EIR is out for public review. That closes next Friday, March 4th. We're going to prepare response to comments, and then we'll have this to the Three Rivers Board for certification in May of 2020. I think that's the last slide. Oh, yeah, why don't you go back up 1 slide? That's just in case there's some comments. So my closing point I want to make is that our 65% design is going to be coming out in here in March, April. And what I'm expecting is that if we don't include that WPIC levee raise, and if there is a flood control dominant operation of FIRO, I'm expecting that this project to be on the order of $15 to $20 million to get to 500-year. And that, given the $550 million we've invested, that is just phenomenal to be able to make this next increment, and really, to me, demonstrates the value of the Arc Spillway. And hopefully other communities can be looking at how they make that next increment, and hopefully they have the same luck we do. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions of the board or public. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Mr. Countryman.
I get nervous when I hear 200-year, 500-year protection. What exactly does that mean? Is that a risk-based analysis, a freeboard analysis, and what hydrology are you using?
Yeah, great question. So we're evaluating the 500-year water surface and demonstrating that all design criteria are met, factors of safety are met, just like if it was the design water surface. And so we're doing a deterministic analysis. And we're, just like we do for ULDC or for FEMA, we're adopting similar criteria for the 500-year. In addition to freeboard, we've looked at containing wind and wave, and some locations like the WPIC, wind and wave is higher than 3 feet. And so that's why part of the reason our levee raise is so high on the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal is containing that wind wave. The hydrology we're using is from CVHS.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if a risk analysis would show you already have 500-year protection. I mean, you know, the thing, freeboard isn't free. And it does provide some protection.
I don't think it would show a risk-based analysis would show we have 500-year, especially on the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal. But it's quite possible with some of the other levee segments. One of the things that bothers me in hindsight is this disparity in levee segments and the levee superiority we have. Ordinarily for these urban basins, we try to design them so that there's not lower levels of protection for segments. And if it is, that it's intentional. That's where you want it to fail. And we kind of ended up there by accident over the decades that we implemented it. But certainly a risk-based analysis, I'd be interested to see what it would show.
Just a comment. Thanks.
Mr. Stewart?
Thank Rick for a good presentation and apologize for not having followed this project as closely as I should. Ron Sork with Friends of the River, and I have some history in this part of the world. Friends of the River, Sierra Club, and South Yuba River Citizens League made a kind of a handshake commitment to the then general manager of Yuba County Water Agency to support them in their efforts to improve flood protection in the Yuba City, Marysville area. And we made that commitment in 1999, around the time that the South Fork Yuba River was added to the state Wild and Scenic River. At least significant portions of it were. And at the time we were thinking that the project would be mostly the new spillways or new outlet works at New Bullard's Bar and maybe a little levee work. It turned out that it was a lot of levee work and levee setbacks, and now Yuba County Water Agency is seeking an amendment to their license at New Bullard's Bar to undertake these project improvements there. So I want to apologize to Rick for not having tracked this project closely, and kind of re-inform the board that a number of environmental groups have been generally supportive of these efforts and still remain so.
Well, thank you. Member Grego?
Yeah, I came in around that time to the Board of Supervisors, and I want to thank the environmental communities I work with, Izzy Martin and other board members in Nevada City, and actually brought them down to the area where the levee had failed twice in 11 years. And so they got to talk to some of the folks down there about, you know, the situation of unsafe levees. And so we appreciate the environmental community supporting those efforts. And when Kurt Akins was the general manager of the water agency, that was one of the things that he wanted to do, was to fix the spillways. But I had another direction as a board of supervisors, and that was to the first defense line of the folks out there was levees. And so Ray Davis, in answer to the Wild and Scenic, gave the Proposition 13 money in order to analyze, you know, what was the risk down there. And that's how Yuba County took off with this idea of providing flood protection. They didn't know how extensive this project was going to be. I mean, one project led to another, which led to another. If we would have known the whole grand scheme of what it was going to look like, we probably would have stopped right then and there, knowing how big and how expensive, and not really knowing how we were going to fund this. But as development started to occur, we used those public-private partnerships in order to achieve, you know, drawing down the state money. And so, you know, the rest is history. And to see Yuba County now looking to go in the direction of 500-year level of protection with, as Rick stated, it's a minimal amount of money in order to achieve that goal. It's incredible. And I think the message it sends to jurisdictions is that it's possible. And it's not always about building and reinforcing levees, but these types of projects can be increased flood protection by what we're describing here today. And that's these outlets at Bullards and the forecasted operation, how quick and how fast that water can go down the system. And so I'm anxious for April 8th. Rick is going to be our guide through this tour of what Three Rivers has been able to do and show off some good stuff that has occurred in Yuba County.
A lot has occurred. It's wonderful to hear all of this and the leadership and just the continued pushing to get things done. You're right. We started off with everything that needed to be done and needing that money. It would just hit a wall. It just kept going. Board members, any comments? We're going to go see April 8th.
I don't see anything.
Any members of the audience? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Well, that's an informational item. Information received. Thank you very much. Those graphics, very helpful. Very helpful. And naming roads is helpful to me because that's how I identify where things are. So thanks.
I'll make sure on our way back to Yuba County that I show Jake as we travel up together that ring levee that runs there by Highway 70. So the one you described, Rick. So
yeah, that was the one I was like, what?
Yeah. You can see it right off the highway.
Oh yeah, the ring levee is the old shopping center, right?
No, it's a little further south.
Yeah, a little further south. Okay. We'll stop chatting here. We'll move on to the next item. Mr. Soon, is that anything more on that?
No, that's it, President Dolan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Okay, the next one is Anjali's on. Aha. And Subar Dosu. This is to bring information to the board of what happened when we asked for compliance with the cease and desist order. When did we do that? In October. So, Angelis, you want to give us the good news?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, President Dolan, members of the board. Angeles Calizo, Board Enforcement Section Chief. And I'm here today to update you on the status of the cease and desist order that was issued to Mr. Todd Dubois, and that was adopted by the board on October 22nd, 2021. Zubair Dostu was the lead engineer on this case, and he will provide you with more details on the item. But before I turn it over to him, I would like to note that, it is rather unusual for a case to reach compliance when it's a matter is elevated to the board at this stage. But I do credit much of that success to Zubair's diligence and continued communication with Mr. Dubois, along with the other stakeholders. And with this, I would like to thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Zubair for his portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Angeles, for your introduction, and congratulations, President Dolan, on your reappointment. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Zubair Dosu, board staff engineer for the enforcement section. And like Angeles said, I am here today to present agenda item 10E, the recently achieved compliance with enforcement case number 2019-15529. Next slide, please. This case was located in Knights Landing along the Sacramento River, south of Sutter County and north of Woodland. The case is located directly downstream of the Highway 113 Knights Landing Bridge. This levee segment is maintained by Yolo County NA22 Unit Number 1. Next slide, please. There are 3 violations at this location. The first violation being a shipping container placed on the waterside berm at the levee toe. The second violation consists of a truck camper, which we refer to as a recreational vehicle per California Code of Regulations, Title 23, which was also placed on the waterside berm. And the last violation, violation number 3, consists of several miscellaneous material all placed on the waterside berm. Next slide, please. So going over a couple key dates, Mr. Bob was formally notified by board staff of the violations in the notice to comply issued on June 13, 2019. Due to the lack of compliance with the notice to comply, a notice of violation was issued on July 26, 2019. In late 2020, board staff was notified by a Yolo County district engineer that additional items were placed on the waterside berm, which resulted in the executive officer issuing a cease and desist order on September 9, 2021. A CDO meeting was held on October 22, 2021, which the board affirmed the cease and desist order requiring full compliance. Within the following week, Mr. Bois confirmed in email his willingness to comply and his intent to remove the encroachments before end of December 2021. On November 4, 2022, a decision letter was issued to Mr. Bois to state the board's affirmation of the CDO, requiring immediate removal of unpermitted encroachments and clarifying the use of the RV outside of flood season does not require a board permit. A site visit was conducted by board staff on January 2nd, 2022, and it was determined compliance had been met. A month later, on February 4, 2022, a compliance letter was issued to Mr. Dubois, formally closing enforcement case number 2019-15529. Next slide, please. So here's a photo showing the site before compliance. And the placement of the non-compliant encroachments on June 14, 2021. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the site after compliance showing the removed non-compliant encroachments on January 2nd, 2022. Next slide, please. Lastly, we would like to give thanks to Mr. Bob for his immediate response to comply following the board's affirmation of the CDO, and moving forward for his respect to keep clear the levee easement that safeguards the community behind him. We would also like to give thanks to our local partners at Yolo County for their technical support and follow-up on this case. And lastly, we would like to thank the board members for their support in affirming the board's staff recommendation and establishing clarity with public matters fairly. This now concludes my presentation. Section Chief Angeles Calisco or I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, we appreciate your thank yous to everyone else. May I thank the two of you and the staff work on this. It would not have been accomplished without your diligence. This is good news and good to have something closed and to show that we can resolve these issues. I didn't expect it, so good work, you two.
Thank you.
I'm not the one who went and talked to him. You all did, so great. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in also and say thanks to the two of you. You know, it's nice when things work out, even if it's harder than it seems like it ought to be. You know, not as hard as it could possibly have been, and we you know, attribute that to the work that the two of you did and folks at the county and others. So thank you.
Board Member Valines. I got all the congratulations, but congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm calling on them all, so congratulations.
I just wanted to say for Mr. Dubois and then Angelis and Zubair, this is the exact kind of result that we would hope for. So I love that you brought this to us and everybody else to say, hey, here's a result that went well. I know they don't always, but some of the hardest votes, if not the hardest votes we do, are, you know, having to do those enforcement things. And I really, first of all, thank you for following up, because in the back of my mind, I thought, well, there's just no way this one could have gone well necessarily. It's just fantastic. I give him a lot of credit. I give you a lot of credit. And I just want to thank you guys publicly, because that's a good result, and it can happen. And if we just go into these all the time with that attitude, we're just all better off. So I just, you do a lot of work, and you don't always get credit for it, and you deserve a lot of credit for something going well like this. I want to say thank you.
Here, here.
Yeah.
Look, there's a chat.
Tim Ramirez.
Oh, Mr. Hand Up, put it in the chat. Okay. We'll get a little silly here toward the end. Thank you, Angelis. Thank you, Zubair. Oh, someone else put something there. Okay. Any more comments? Any more comments from the public? We're all gonna clap.
Oh,
Yes.
you know what, Madam President?
Yes.
Elisa Sabatini from the county, from Yolo County.
Yes.
Also wanted to thank Zubair, appreciating all the effort, and they were grateful for the assistance.
Oh,
So
thank
thank
you.
you, Elisa, for that comment. That will be in the record.
Oh, thank you for that. The participant list there in my eyesight. Oh, there you are, Elisa Sabatini. Thank you for joining in and watching. Good news for Yolo County. Good news for Knights Landing that we could clean something up. Okay. Anything else? Any more chats? No hands up? We'll move on. We're at item 11. We've received our executive officer's report. She brings it to us at its freshest, most current information, and then we have the others written, and we've received them. We don't allow you all to give us a PowerPoint on each of these, but we do read them and appreciate them and know what it is you're doing, and we can contact you. So thank you for that. Any board comments or committee updates? Should I call on you all? Mr. Countryman, any updates?
I'll just mention that participating in the ongoing FERO for Oroville and New Bullards Bar Reservoir. And we have a meeting coming up, I think it's next week. When I have more information, I'll give an update to the board.
Well, thank you. Bless you for doing that. Board Member Grego, got any updates?
Nothing.
You're organizing the tour, right?
Yes, organizing the tour for April 8th. It's going to be great. We're hoping that we can have a bus so that we can all kind of gather together safely. We're going to start at Duke's Diner. I'm going to do a continental breakfast for everybody that's coming. And there's plenty of parking across the street. That's a safe place to park. And we'll take off from there. And we'll see some projects in Yuba County.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
Board Member Johnson, what's up?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't decided on an advisory committee. They want to see what happens to their recommendations before they meet again. Who do we got?
Mike Valines, what does he have?
No report. Grateful to be on the board still.
What do you have there?
I have a dog who's been apparently eating shoes while I've been in the board meeting. I didn't realize it. So this is Yeti, and he's been devoured. My other dog's great. This one is eating everything apparently.
Okay.
Oh my God, look at that face.
Mr. Ramirez, the one with the best background. I just love the map.
Thank you. Nothing to add. Thanks, Jane.
All right. And I have nothing to add. Not much. I certainly asked for the reappointment, and I did put my name in to be this position. But to follow the extraordinary leadership of President Edgar is daunting. So I will do my best. I certainly take suggestions, and I am so respectful of the wonderful staff that we have, And I think we will be able to continue to make positive progress as we move forward. I'm dedicated to that. So we don't have closed session this afternoon because you made two of us get up pretty early to get here for the 8:30. And if there's no
We
further.
just do the reporting, sorry. What, we just report out that there was no report.
Oh, I did report out at 9 that there was no comment, so I will report out again that we did hold a closed session at 8:30 this morning, and there are no report outs from that, no conclusions. So with that, we're adjourned. Enjoy the cold weather and ask for rain. And
Thanks,
snow.
everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Congratulations again, board member.
Everybody.
Thanks.
And all, pray for rain.
Thank you.
Bye.